The galactic core did not merely exist in space, it presided over it. From a distance, the central station looked less like a construct of metal and engineering and more like a captured star wrapped in rings of polished diamond. It hung in the void, a colossal artificial moon orbited by rivers of traffic that flowed in 3 dimensions. Thousands of luxury yachts, heavy freighters, and diplomat couriers formed glowing ribbons of amber and sapphire light against the black backdrop of the universe. They moved in perfect, synchronized silence, guided by the unseen hands of traffic control AIs, all funneling toward the beating heart of the galactic economy. Holographic advertisements the size of continents shimmered in the vacuum, projected from the station's outer hull. They depicted smiling families of a dozen different species, cascading waterfalls of gold coins, and the ubiquitous, comforting logo of the Interstellar Reserve Bank. The slogan burned into the retinas of every pilot on approach: prosperity across the stars, inside the station. Reality was curated to an agonizing degree of perfection. The air smelled of ozone, crushed lilies, and credit chits. The gravity was set to a precise standard that made everyone feel slightly lighter, slightly more graceful, and significantly more expensive. Vexa Rai moved through the grand hall of the bank like a shark gliding through a coral reef. If the shark were draped in silks that cost more than a dreadnought-class starship. She was tall, even by the standards of her people, with skin the color of twilight skies, patterned with faint bioluminescent markings that shifted slowly like drifting constellations. Her eyes were solid pools of luminous violet, lacking pupils, giving her a gaze that was at once penetrating and unreadably alien. She walked with a terrifying fluid elegance, her heels clicking a sharp, authoritative rhythm on the floor of translucent marble. Beneath the floor, visible through the stone, simulated nebulas swirled in slow motion. Internally, Vexa was screaming. She nodded politely to a floating teller pod manned by a cephalopod banker in a velvet suit. She offered a practiced, thin smile to a visiting dignitary from the mid-rim who bowed too low as she passed. Vultures, she thought, keeping her face a mask of serene banking excellence, every single one of them. She was a senior client liaison, a title that sounded impressive but essentially meant she was a glorified babysitter for the galaxy's obscenely wealthy. She belonged to House Rai, a banking dynasty that had helped lay the foundation stones of this very station 400 years ago. The Rai name opened doors, it silenced rooms. It also felt like a noose made of gold wire tightening slowly around her throat. She reached the edge of the VIP balcony, looking down at the main floor. It was a chaotic ballet of greed. Thousands of beings bartered, transferred, and hoarded wealth in a space designed to intimidate. The architecture was vaulted, cathedral-like, screaming that money was the only true religion. Vexa hated it. She hated the way her colleagues looked at clients, calculating their worth before they even said hello. She hated the secret ledgers she knew existed beneath the pristine white interface of her terminal. She hated that she was good at this. She turned away from the railing and walked toward the security sector, needing a dose of reality. Jace was there, as he always was, sitting behind a curved bank of amber hollow screens. He was human, a species that was considered industrious but prone to being emotionally messy. Jace looked like he had been carved out of something durable and left out in the rain. His corporate uniform was pressed, but he wore heavy, worn combat boots that violated 3 different dress code regulations. He had a scar running through his left eyebrow, interrupting the line of hair, and his eyes were a flat, cynical gray that missed nothing. He did not look up as Vexa approached. He was watching a thermal feed of the cargo docks. "You look like you are plotting a murder," Jace said. his voice a low rumble that vibrated pleasantly in the sterile air. He tapped a screen, dismissing a minor alert, or perhaps a hostile takeover. It is hard to tell with your people. Vexa leaned against the edge of his console, crossing her arms. I was considering jumping out of an airlock, she replied, her voice cool and melodic. But I would not want to traumatize the window washers. Jace finally looked up. He leaned back in his chair, the synthetic leather creaking. The tension between them was instant, a static charge that had been building for months. It was professional, mostly, but there was a current of recognition underneath. They were both wolves pretending to be domesticated dogs. The window washers are droids. Vexa, he said. They do not have feelings. Unlike the vice president of loan sharking you just walked away from. He looks upset. He wanted me to approve a loan for a terraforming project on a moon that is already inhabited, Vexa said, disgust flickering across her features before she smoothed it away. He called the locals incidental biological obstacles. Jace's jaw tightened. He knew that term. He had been a soldier in the frontier wars before he became a rent-a-cop for the bank. He had seen what happens when banks decide people are obstacles. Sounds like a standard Tuesday, Jace said dryly. Why are you down here slacking off with the help? Do you not have a planet to foreclose on? I find the air down here less toxic, Vexa said. She looked at him, really looked at him, tracing the line of tension in his shoulders. You are watching the lower perimeter again. Expecting trouble? Always, Jace said, his eyes flicking back to his screens. Too much money in one place. It makes the universe nervous. You should get back up there. Rai, your handler is looking for you. He gestured with his chin toward the upper levels where a supervisor was scanning the crowd. Vexa sighed, a sound that was entirely too human for an alien of her station. Do try not to shoot anyone while I am gone. Jace, she said, pushing herself off the console. Try not to sell anyone's soul, he countered. She walked away, feeling his eyes on her back until she turned the corner. She refused to admit that the brief, jagged conversation was the highlight of her morning. 70 levels below the marble floors and the nebula-filled tiles. The air did not smell like crushed lilies. It smelled of recycled sweat, burning lubricants, and despair. Arya woke up because a drone was screaming at her. It was a sanitation unit, a floating metal disc with a singular red eye, hovering 3 feet from her face. It chirped an angry, dissonant binary rhythm, flashing a warning light against the damp concrete wall of the maintenance tunnel. Citizen, the drone's synthesized voice grated. Loitering in structural recesses is a Class C violation. Vacate immediately or face chemical dispersal. Arya Solis sat up, clutching her thin, battered backpack to her chest. She was 22 years old but looked younger due to the hollows in her cheeks and the oversized, scavenged mechanic's jumpsuit she wore. Her hair was a dark, tangled mess that she had tried to hack short with a vibro knife weeks ago. Dirt was smudge-painted across her forehead like war paint. I am moving. I am moving, Arya muttered, voice raspy with sleep. You do not have to be so rude about it. It is barely morning cycle. She scrambled to her feet, her joints popping. The tunnel was cold, a deep, bone-settling chill that never really left her. She grabbed her boots, mismatched, one heavy polymer, one leather, and jammed her feet into them. The drone extended a nozzle, threateningly. Okay, okay. Arya held up her hands, backing away down the curved corridor. I am gone. Have a nice day cleaning up sludge. She ducked through a heavy blast door and emerged into the neon-drenched chaos of the lower city. Here, the station was a vertical slum. Pipes leaked steam into the air, and the light came from flickering signs advertising noodle stalls, body mod shops, and oxygen bars. Arya was hungry. It was a sharp, familiar cramp in her stomach, but she ignored it. Today was the day. She reached into her pocket and pulled out the only thing of value she owned. It was a data chip, cracked down the center and scarred by time. It looked like junk. To anyone else, it was trash. To Arya, it was the only piece of her father she had left. She found a quiet corner behind a vending machine and tapped the side of the chip. A small, flickering hologram projected into the air, the face of a tired, kind-eyed man with graying hair. "If anything happens to me," the recording whispered, the voice tinny and distorted. Arya knew the words by heart. She mouthed them along with him. "Go to the Interstellar Reserve Bank, Central Branch. Use this account code. Do not trust anyone who smiles too wide. And Arya, remember who you are." The hologram frizzled and died. Arya stared at the empty air for a second, then shoved the chip back into her pocket deep, wrapping her fingers around it until her knuckles turned white. She had spent 6 months hitchhiking across the sector in cargo holds, dodging slavers and customs agents to get to this station. She had 0 credits to her name. She had eaten half a protein bar yesterday. She smelled like engine grease, but she had the code. "The time to go see how the other half lives," she whispered to herself. She caught her reflection in the glass of the vending machine. She looked wild, desperate. She needed to blend in, or at least, she needed to not look like she had just crawled out of a sewer pipe. She navigated the crowded alleyways, her eyes scanning. Near a laundry vent, she saw a synthetic leather jacket draped over a crate, abandoned or forgotten. It was 2 sizes too big and a garish shade of maroon, but it was clean. Arya swiped it in one fluid motion, pulling it on as she kept walking. She turned the collar up to hide the grime on her neck. "High civilization," she muttered, checking the pockets and finding a half-used pack of mints. She popped one in her mouth. Tastes like synthetic peppermint and guilt. The journey upward was a study in stratification. She took a service elevator 400 floors up, wedged between a crate of frozen calamari and a silent, hulking loader bot. When the doors opened, the noise of the lower city vanished, replaced by a soft, ambient hum. She walked for an hour, crossing transit bridges that spanned dizzying drops. The people around her changed. The rough jumpsuits and utility gear were replaced by flowing robes, shimmering smart suits, and jewelry that glowed with internal power. Heads turned as she passed. A mother pulled her child closer, shielding the young alien's eyes as if poverty were contagious. A group of teenagers in floating gravity boots pointed and laughed, their voices high and cruel. Arya kept her head down, staring at the floor. The floor got cleaner the higher she went. By the time she reached the central district, the ground was polished so bright she could see the holes in her boots reflected in it. And then, she saw it. The bank. It was a mountain of glass and white stone dominating the plaza. The doors were towering curtains of shimmering energy, 50 feet high. Guardians in ornate, ceremonial gold armor stood motionless at the entrance, holding pikes that crackled with lethal voltage. Arya stopped, her breath caught in her throat. It was beautiful, and it was terrifying. It looked like a fortress built to keep people like her out. She touched the chip in her pocket again. For Dad. She breathed. She squared her shoulders, pulled the maroon jacket tighter around her thin frame, and walked toward the energy curtain. The sensation of passing through the barrier was like walking through a sheet of cold water. She emerged into the lobby, and the sound of the galaxy seemed to drop away. replaced by the hushed, reverent silence of immense wealth. The lobby was vast enough to hold a weather system. Floating teller pods drifted like lily pads in the air. The light was golden and perfect. Arya felt tiny. She felt dirty. She felt every eye in the room turn toward her. Two wealthy clients, tall beings with elongated skulls and robes made of spun silver, were standing near a digital fountain. They stopped their conversation as Arya walked past. "Is station sanitation on strike?" one of them drawled, his voice loud enough to carry. The other chuckled, a wet, unpleasant sound. It must be the new diversity initiative. Let the beggars look at the chandeliers before we have security incinerate them. Arya burned. Her face felt hot, but she kept walking. She locked her eyes on a reception pod near the center of the room. The receptionist was a humanoid with flawless blue skin and a smile that looked like it had been surgically applied. She was typing on a holographic interface. She did not look up as Arya approached. "Excuse me," Arya said. Her voice cracked. She cleared her throat and tried again. Louder. "Excuse me." The receptionist paused, her fingers hovering over the light. She slowly, agonizingly raised her head. Her eyes swept over Arya, taking in the dirty hair, the oversized maroon jacket, the mismatched boots. The look was not angry. It was amused. "Deliveries are at the rear dock. Creature," the receptionist said smoothly. "You are lost." "I am not a delivery," Arya said, her hands shaking as she pulled the chip from her pocket. "I am here to access an account. My father left me a code." The receptionist stared at the chip as if it were a dead rodent. She let out a short, sharp laugh. "An account," she repeated. She looked around the lobby, catching the eye of a security guard and smirking. "Did you hear that? The tunnel rat has an account." Laughter rippled through the nearby patrons. It wasn't loud, raucous laughter. It was the soft, tittering laughter of people who had never been hungry in their lives. It was worse. "Please," Arya said, her voice tightening. "Just check the code," the receptionist sighed, a tragic production of suffering. "Give it here. But when the system rejects you, I am calling the drones to sanitize this floor." She snatched the chip from Arya's hand and slotted it into the reader, high above, on the mezzanine balcony. Vexa Rai was reviewing a portfolio of asteroid mining rights when the sound of laughter drifted up. It was the wrong kind of laughter. It was the sound of a pack turning on a wounded animal. She frowned, stepping to the railing. Her enhanced vision zoomed in instantly. She saw the girl. Small, human, dressed in rags that were heartbreakingly clean, as if she had tried her best to look presentable and failed. Vexa saw the receptionist smirk. She saw the wealthy client sneering. But mostly, she saw the girl's eyes. They were wide and terrified. But there was something else there, a stubborn, fiery pride that refused to break. It reminded Vexa of something she had buried a long time ago. Then, a chime sounded in her head. Her neural implant, connected directly to the bank's mainframe, spiked with a priority alert. It was faint, a ghost signal, but it was there. Someone had just inputted a code that bypassed the standard sorting algorithms. Vexa stiffened. That was impossible. Low-level reception terminals could not process high-level encryption, unless the code was ancient. Curiosity warred with her training. Her training said to let security handle the vagrant. Her curiosity, and a sudden, sharp spike of anger at the cruelty she was witnessing, won. Vexa Rai turned and glided toward the gravity lift. Down in the lobby, the receptionist was tapping her screen, waiting for the rejection buzzer. "This is taking a long time," she muttered. "The chip is probably corrupted, just like its owner. I assure you, the owner is fine. A voice cut through the air like a diamond blade. The lobby went silent. Vexarai descended the steps from the lift, her constellation-patterned skin glowing softly. She moved with an authority that sucked the air out of the room. The receptionist scrambled to stand, knocking over her stylus. Mistress Rai, This individual was disturbing the peace. I was about to call security on them. Were you? Vexa asked. She stopped 2 feet from Arya. She towered over the human girl, but she did not loom. She looked at the receptionist with cold, violet eyes. It looked to me like you were wasting company time mocking a potential client. Since when is cruelty part of your job description? The receptionist went pale. Look at her. Mistress. She has no credits. Vexa turned to Arya. Up close, she could smell the faint odor of old water and sweat, but she also smelled the sharp tang of fear. Is that true? Vexa asked softly. Do you have no credits? Arya swallowed hard. She looked up at the beautiful alien woman, feeling like a speck of dust next to a star. I have a code, Arya said. My father said it was important. Vexa looked at the data terminal. The processing light was still spinning yellow. It had not rejected the chip. Come with me, Vexa said abruptly. The receptionist sputtered. Mistress, you cannot mean into your office. She is filthy. If you speak one more word, Vexa said without looking back, I will have your employment contract terminated and your credit rating set to 0. The silence that followed was absolute. Vexa gestured to Arya. Come. We will resolve this in private. Arya hesitated, then grabbed her backpack straps and hurried after the tall alien, keeping her head down as they walked past the stunned crowd. Vexa's office was a sphere of glass suspended from the side of the station structure. The floor, ceiling, and walls were transparent, offering a 360-degree view of the galactic core. Stars spun slowly beneath their feet. Arya stood in the center of the room, afraid to touch anything. She felt like she was floating in space. Sit, Vexa said, gesturing to a chair that looked like it was molded from white smoke. Arya sat on the edge of it. It was softer than any bed she had ever slept in. I am Vexa Rai, the alien woman said, moving behind her desk. She tapped the smooth surface, and the data from the reception pod transferred to her private terminal. I am Arya, the girl said, Arya Solis. Vexa looked at the name. It meant nothing to her. She initiated the verification sequence. So, Arya Solis, Vexa said, her fingers dancing over the holographic keys. You have a legacy code. These are rare. Usually, they are for small trust funds or safety deposit boxes. Did your father say what was in it? He just said to use it if I was in trouble, Arya said, and that I should not trust anyone who smiles too wide. Vexa's lips twitched. A wise man. The system pinged. Verification Tier 1. Cleared. Vexa frowned. Tier 1 was standard. But then the screen flashed red. Verification Tier 2. Cleared. Encrypted channel opened. Red lights blinked on Vexa's console. That was unusual. Tier 2 was for corporate assets. Verification Tier 3. Cleared. Black Protocol initiated. Vexa stopped typing. Black Protocol? That was military-grade encryption. She looked up at Arya, who was picking at a loose thread on her scavenged jacket, oblivious. The screen flashed again. Sovereign Protocol detected. Vexa's heart skipped a beat. Sovereign Protocol. That was not just rare. That was mythic. It was the kind of security reserved for planetary governments and the bank's own founding charters. Down in the security sector. Jace Coven was drinking a cup of lukewarm synthetic coffee when his board lit up like a festival tree. "What in the hells?" he muttered. Massive encryption cycles were spinning up, the power draw was spiking, and the origin point was Vex's office. Jace stood up, the chair crashing back. He didn't think. He didn't call it in. He just moved, sprinting toward the transit tubes. His gut was screaming that Vexa was in over her head. Back in the office, the air felt heavy. The lights dimmed automatically as the system drew more power to process the data key. System messages began to scroll across Vexa's wall-sized display, reflecting in her wide, violet eyes. Legacy account found owner, Area Solus. Status, active, access, first tier, air only. Vexa's calm mask cracked. Her mouth opened slightly. This was impossible. A homeless human girl with a first-tier air status? The screen requested a biometric confirmation. Vexa looked at Arya. "I need you to place your hand on the desk," Vexa said, her voice sounding strange to her own ears. Arya blinked. "Is it broken? Just place your hand." "Arya." Arya reached out and pressed her dirty palm against the pristine glass desk. A beam of light scanned her hand. Bone structure and DNA. Identity confirmed. Unlocking assets. The scrolling stopped. The amount field, which had been hidden by digital locks, began to decrypt. Vexa watched the numbers. First, the interest. The system calculated interest accrued over 20 years. But it wasn't normal interest. It was compounding at galactic sovereign rates. It was tied to war debts. It was tied to planetary resource bonds from the Orion sector. The numbers started to spin. 1 million, 10 million, 100 million. They kept going. Billions, trillions. The string of numerals stretched across the entire wall display, wrapping around the curve of the room. It was a snake of golden light, endless and terrifying. The system auto-converted the raw data into a standard currency approximation. Vexa stood up. Her legs felt weak. She looked at the number. She tried to comprehend it. It was enough money to buy the station, not just the station. It was enough to buy the fleet outside. It was enough to purchase a small star system. It was enough to crash the galactic credit standard if it was moved too quickly. A legal note projected itself in the air. Glowing red. Warning. This account holds the Consolidated Reparations and Reserve Fund for the Orion War. Withdrawal or transfer modifies galactic economic stability indices. The silence in the room was deafening. The only sound was the hum of the cooling fans trying to keep up with the processor. Arya leaned forward, squinting at the wall of light. She didn't understand the financial notation. She just saw a lot of zeros. Is that a lot?" Arya asked. Her voice was small, trembling. "Can I afford a hotel room?" Vexa looked at the girl. She looked at the hole in Arya's boot. She looked back at the number that represented more wealth than some gods possessed. Tears pricked Vexa's eyes. It was a hysterical reaction. The sheer absurdity of it punched the air out of her lungs. "Arya," Vexa whispered, "you could buy the hotel chain. You could buy the planet the hotel is built on." Outside the office, the privacy filter flickered for a fraction of a second due to the power surge. Down in the lobby, the receptionist looked up. Through the glass balcony for just one moment, the wall display was visible. She saw the number. She gasped, dropping her data pad. It shattered on the floor. Around her, others saw it too. A ripple of shock went through the crowd. Whispers started, then shouts. Comms links were opened. In Vexa's mind, a thought clarified, ringing like a bell. A homeless human girl entered a galactic bank, she thought numbly, and everyone laughed, unaware of her balance. The terminal flashed a final, ominous warning, pulsing in time with Vexa's racing heart. Automatic notification sent to Executive Board, Central Governance, Economic Stability Council. Vexa stared at the flashing red text. The secrecy was gone. The alarm was out. She looked at Arya, who was still sitting on the edge of the chair, looking confused and hopeful. The most powerful people in the galaxy had just been told that a destitute human girl held the keys to their destruction, and they would be coming for her. Vexa reached under her desk and hit the silent alarm for her personal security detail. "Stay close to me," she said to Arya, her voice turning to steel. "Do not move." "Why?" Arya asked, panic rising. "Did I overdraw?" "No," Vexa said, watching the doors. "You just broke the world." Then the blast doors of the elevator slid open, and Jace Coven sprinted onto the floor, his weapon drawn, his eyes locking onto Vexa's as the station's emergency sirens began to wail. The boardroom did not exist in any physical location that appeared on a public map. It was a digital ghost, a secure server node buried deep within the absolute zero core of the station's reactor shielding. The room itself was pitch black, save for the circular table of obsidian glass that floated in the center. One by one, blue columns of light snapped into existence around the table, resolving into the holographic avatars of the beings who truly ran the galaxy. There was a silence that felt heavy, pressurized by the weight of entire star systems. At the head of the table sat the chairman. He was an Intari, a species whose skin had hardened over centuries into a substance resembling faceted geode. He did not move. He merely glittered in the low light, his eyes like chips of frozen emerald. "We are facing a catastrophic liquidity event," the chairman said. His voice sounded like grinding stones. Around the table, the avatars flickered with agitation. There were 12 of them, corporate monarchs, planetary governors, and the heads of the merchant guilds. They had all received the alert. "The account is real?" asked a delegate from the mining consortium, a bloated creature floating in a suspense tank. "It is real," the chairman confirmed. "The Orion War Reparations Fund. It was established 80 years ago as a theoretical stabilizer, a mechanism to hold the surplus GDP of the core worlds and prevent inflation while promising aid to the Rim. It was a lie we told ourselves to feel generous. It was never meant to be accessed. And yet, a human girl has the key," said a smooth, silken voice from the shadows. Senator Kale leaned forward into the light. He was humanoid, handsome in a way that felt manufactured, with hair the color of polished steel and a smile that did not reach his pale eyes. He wore the robes of the Galactic Senate, but everyone at the table knew his power came from the shadow markets, not the voting booth. "She is a homeless vagrant," Kyle continued. "She walked in off the street. We simply seized the assets under stability emergency powers. Section 4, Paragraph 2. We declare her mentally unfit and take custody of the funds." "You cannot," the chairman rumbled. "The account is bound by a sovereign contract. It predates the current banking charter. If we violate the terms openly, the trust index of the interstellar reserve will collapse. Every world in the Middle Rim will pull their assets by morning. We would trigger the very collapse we are trying to avoid." "Then we do not violate them openly," Kale said, tapping his fingers on the obsidian table. "We use a scalpel, not a hammer." "Explain," the chairman commanded. "We need a face," Kale said. "Someone the public trusts, someone from a lineage that screams legitimacy. We assign a guardian to this girl, someone to guide her, to protect her from the burden of her sudden wealth." The avatars murmured. "Vexa Rai," Kale said. "She found the girl. She is the heir to the Rai banking dynasty. Her face is on the brochures. The public loves her." We appoint Vexa as the girl's official wealth guardian and liaison." "And the girl?" asked the mining delegate. Kale smiled, and it was a terrifying thing. "The girl will be overwhelmed. She is frightened. She is hungry. We give her comfort. We give her walls to keep the world out. And then, Vexa will gently guide her to sign a temporary centralized management agreement, just until she is ready, which will be never." The chairman considered this. His gemstone face remained impassive. "Vexa Rai has a streak of independence," the chairman warned. "Her psychological profile suggests latent morality. She is a banker." Kyle dismissed. "She knows which side of the airlock keeps her breathing." "Send her the assignment, and send a containment team to the lower levels, just in case our new billionaire decides to run." In the glass-walled office high above the station floor, the air was still vibrating with the tension of the revelation. The scrolling numbers on the wall had finally stopped, freezing on a sum that was so large it looked like a glitch in the universe. Arya Solace was staring at it. She reached out a dirty finger and poked the air, as if trying to see if the hologram was solid. "So," she said, her voice cracking slightly. "Just to be clear, I can afford a shower." Vexa Rai stood by the window, her back rigid. She turned slowly. "Arya," Vexa said, her tone dead serious, "you could buy the ocean that the water came from. You could buy the company that built the plumbing. You are, as of 3 minutes ago, the single richest individual in recorded history." Arya let out a short, nervous laugh. "That seems like a mistake. I mean, look at me. I have been wearing the same socks for 9 days. "It is not a mistake," Vexa said. She walked over to her desk and killed the display, plunging the room back into the soft ambient light of the stars outside. "But it is a target." "A target?" Arya asked, pulling her legs up onto the expensive chair. "Money is gravity, Arya," Vexa explained. "A little bit of money attracts friends. This much money, it attracts black holes. It warps reality around you. Governments will fall if you move these funds. Wars could start or stop. You are not just a person anymore. You are a strategic resource." Arya looked down at her hands. They were calloused, the nails chipped. She thought about her dad, coughing in that small room on the transport ship, telling her that the code would keep her safe. He had not said it would make her a god. "I do not want to start a war," Arya said quietly. "I just want, I do not know, a hot meal? And maybe I can help the guys down in the maintenance tunnels. There is an old man named Harl who needs new lungs. Can I buy lungs?" Vexa watched her. She had expected greed. She had expected the girl to ask for a yacht, or a palace, or a ticket to the pleasure worlds of the inner core. Instead, she was thinking about a homeless man's respiratory system. For the first time in years, the icy knot in Vexa's chest loosened, just a fraction. "You can buy lungs for everyone on the station," Vexa said softly. The door chimed, and then slid open before Vexa could authorize it. Jace Coven stepped inside, holstering his sidearm but keeping his hand near the grip. He looked around the room, his gray eyes scanning the corners for threats before landing on Vexa. "Security sensors picked up a massive data spike," Jace said. "And then I get an override command from the board telling me to ignore it, which usually means the building is on fire and they do not want anyone to know." He looked at Arya, who was curled up in the chair looking like a frightened urchin in a maroon jacket. "Is the kid the fire?" Jace asked. "She is the spark," Vexa corrected. "Jace, meet Arya Solace. She is our newest client." Jace raised an eyebrow. The scar through his eyebrow crinkled. "The one the lobby was laughing at?" "They are not laughing anymore," Arya said, finding a scrap of courage. No, Vexa said grimly. They are panic-buying stocks. Jace, I need you to lock down this floor and no one comes in unless I authorize it. Jace walked over to the desk, ignoring the order. He looked at Vexa, his voice dropping to a low rumble that Arya couldn't quite hear. Vexa, look at your command feed. You have been flagged. Vexa blinked and accessed her internal interface. A message from the chairman was pulsing in her vision. Priority directive. Subject Arya Solis is designated a Class Alpha VIP. You are appointed sole guardian. Escort subject to the Celestial Suite immediately. Secure signature on attached management protocols. Vexa felt a cold shiver walk down her spine. They had moved fast. Too fast. We have orders, Vexa said, masking her unease. We are moving to the Celestial Suite. Jace looked at her, then at Arya. That is the penthouse. We usually reserve that for emperors and people who own planets. Well, Arya said, standing up and tugging on her oversized jacket. I guess I am moving up in the world. Do I get arrested for being too rich? Is that a crime here? With that balance, Jace said dryly, you are a bigger security threat than a fusion bomb. If you sneeze, the stock market crashes. Try not to sneeze. He stepped back to let them pass, falling into step beside Vexa. As they walked toward the private elevator, his shoulder brushed hers. It was accidental, but the contact lingered for a second longer than necessary. Watch your six. Rye, Jace murmured. I saw a squad of Sector 7 enforcers moving toward the lifts. They are not bank security. I know, Vexa whispered back. Keep your hand on your gun. Jace. The journey to the penthouse was a surreal lesson in hypocrisy. Vexa led Arya through the private transit tubes, a network of glass tunnels that offered breathtaking views of the station's interior. As they passed checkpoints and service stations, the news of Arya's account had evidently leaked, or at least, the rumor that she was important had spread. A group of bank clerks who had been sneering at the lobby feed 10 minutes ago were now lined up by the transit doors. As Arya walked past, they bowed deep, scraping the floor. Greetings, respected client, one of them stammered. If you require anything, refreshments, a foot massage, a new atmosphere, please command us. Arya stopped. She looked at the clerk, a bird-like alien with colorful plumage. Hey, Arya said, aren't you the guy who held his nose when I walked by the cafe earlier? The clerk went pale. Surely you are mistaken. Great one. I have a deviated septum. I hold my nose often. Arya snorted, a sound that was entirely unaristocratic. Right, Arya said. Keep holding it. It suits you. She walked on, head held a little higher. Vexa suppressed a smile. Jace was not smiling. He was watching the shadows. As they boarded the private high-speed tram that would take them to the spire, Jace noticed a maintenance drone hovering too close to the track. It wasn't a cleaner. It was a surveillance unit, military grade, painted to look like a janitor. We are being herded, Jace said quietly to Vexa as the tram accelerated. I know, Vexa said. The board wants her isolated. The Celestial Suite is the most secure location on the station. Secure means it keeps people out, Jace said. It also means it keeps people in. It is a golden cage, Vexa. Vexa looked at Arya, who was pressing her face against the glass, watching the stars blur by with childlike wonder. I will not let them cage her, Vexa said, but I need time to figure out what the game is. The game is always the same. Jace grunted, take the money, bury the body. The Celestial Suite was obscene. That was the only word for it. It occupied the entire top spire of the bank. The floors were made of floating distinct matter tiles. The walls were pure energy fields that could be dialed to opacity or transparency. A waterfall of liquid light cascaded down one wall. Arya stood in the center of the living area, which was larger than the entire cargo bay she had traveled in. "Is this for me?" she asked. "It is yours," Vexa said, tapping a panel to dim the lights to a comfortable amber. "For as long as you remain a client of the Interstellar Reserve." Arya dropped her backpack on a couch that cost more than a colony ship. She looked lost. "I do not belong here, Vexa," she said softly. "I feel like a thief. Like any second someone is going to kick down the door and throw me back in the tunnel." Vexa walked over to a sideboard and poured a glass of sparkling blue water. She handed it to Arya. "You are not a thief, Arya. The thieves are the ones wearing the suits downstairs." Arya took the glass with both hands. She looked at Vexa. "You are wearing a suit." Vexa paused. She looked down at her tailored silk armor. "So I am," Vexa said. She reached up and unpinned the high collar of her jacket, letting it fall open. She rolled her shoulders, the perfect posture slumping just a little. It was a small gesture, but it signaled a massive shift. She was stepping out of her role. "I hate this place," Vexa admitted. Her voice was quiet, stripped of its professional melody. "I hate the politics. I hate the greed. My family built this bank on the bones of worlds they stripped bare. I have spent my whole life trying to be perfect, trying to pretend I do not smell the rot." Arya looked at her with wide eyes. "Why do you stay?" "Because if I leave, I cannot protect anyone," Vexa said. "Inside, I have power. Outside, I am just another runaway." Arya nodded slowly. She understood running away. "Maybe I should just pull it all out in cash," Arya joked weakly. "Just fill a shuttle with credit chips and sleep on a pile of money like a dragon." Vexa laughed. It was a genuine sound, bright and surprising. "I would pay to see the teller's face if you asked for 1,000,000,000,000 credits in cash," Vexa said. "We would need a cargo freighter just to carry the physical currency." Jace was pacing the perimeter of the room, scanning the energy walls with a handheld device. "Hate to interrupt the bonding moment," he said, his voice tight. "But I am picking up signal interference on the comms, and there are 3 distinct power signatures moving up the service shaft. Heavy combat armor." Vexa's smile vanished. "They are moving up the timeline," she said. "Who?" Arya asked, gripping her water glass. 70 levels down, in a secure maintenance bay." Senator Kale was watching a monitor. On the screen, he could see the thermal outlines of the 3 people in the penthouse. He tapped his earpiece. "Status," Kyle said. "The team is in position," a distorted voice replied. "We are ready to breach." "Hold," Kyle commanded. "Let Vexa try the contract first. If the girl signs willingly, it saves us a great deal of paperwork. If she refuses, then you may trigger the stability protocol." "Understood." Kyle turned to the mercenary captain standing beside him. The captain was a massive reptile with cybernetic eyes. "Remember," Kale said, "the girl must survive. The ex-soldier, he is expendable. And Vexa, if she gets in the way, wound her. It will make for a tragic story on the evening news." In the penthouse, Vexa's datapad chimed. It was a secure file transfer from the board, the contract. Vexa picked up the pad. She read the terms. It was a masterpiece of legal deception. It was titled Temporary Asset Protection Guardianship Agreement. It used words like safety, stewardship, and fiscal responsibility. But Vexa knew how to read the code between the lines. Clause 14. Guardian assumes full power of attorney. Clause 22. Client movement restricted to secure facilities for duration of contract. Clause 89. Fund usage determined by Stability Council vote. It was a slavery contract dressed up in silk. Vexa, Arya said. You look like you just ate something sour. Vexa looked up. She looked at Arya, who was trusting her. She looked at Jace, who was watching her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. I have to ask you to sign something, Vexa said. She walked over to the low table between them and set the pad down. The holographic document shimmered in the air. The board wants you to sign this, Vexa said. It assigns control of the fund to a management committee. It puts me in charge of your daily life. It basically says you are too inexperienced to handle this money. So we will do it for you. Arya squinted at the floating text. It was dense and confusing. She looked at Vexa. Can you explain it like you are explaining it to a tired kid with no breakfast? Vexa took a breath. She looked at the door, where the board was waiting for a confirmation signal. She looked at Jace. If she lied, she would be safe. Her family would be pleased. The system would continue. If she told the truth, she would be burning her life to the ground. Vexa looked into Arya's eyes. If you sign this, Vexa said, her voice shaking slightly, you will never see a credit of that money. You will be a prisoner in this tower. They will use your name to hide their crimes, and they will keep you here until you die of old age. It is a cage. Arya, do not sign it. The silence in the room was absolute. Jace stopped pacing. He stared at Vexa, a look of profound respect dawning on his face. Arya looked at the contract, then back at Vexa. You work for them, Arya said. Vexa nodded. I do. But you are telling me not to trust them. Vexa reached out and canceled the hologram. The document vanished. I am telling you to trust yourself, Vexa said. And I suppose I am telling you to trust me. I will not let them do this to you. Arya's eyes filled with tears. She reached out and took Vexa's hand. Vexa's skin was cool and smooth. Arya's was warm and rough. Okay, Arya whispered. We do not sign. What do we do? We run, Jace said from the window. A split second later, the universe exploded. It wasn't a metaphor. The main blast doors of the suite were blown inward by a shaped charge. A concussion wave of heat and sound slammed into the room. Vexa was thrown back onto the couch. Jace was moving before the smoke cleared. Get down, Jace roared, flipping the heavy table over to create a barricade. Gunfire erupted. Streaks of red plasma sizzled through the air, scorching the priceless walls. 3 figures in heavy black combat armor stormed through the smoke, their weapons raised. Hostile breach, Jace yelled, returning fire with his sidearm. His shots sparked off the attacker's shielding. Vexa grabbed Arya and pulled her behind the marble bar. They are not bank security, Vexa shouted over the noise. No kidding, Jace yelled back. He popped up, firing 2 precision shots. One of the attackers stumbled, their armor venting gas. We need to leave, Jace shouted. The main lift is compromised. Vexa, is there a service exit? The maintenance shaft, Vexa cried. Behind the waterfall. Jace provided covering fire. No, move! Go! Vexa grabbed Arya's hand. Run! They scrambled across the room, staying low. Plasma bolts chewed up the floor tiles behind them. The air smelled of ozone and burning synthetic silk. They reached the wall of liquid light. Vexa slapped a hidden panel. The water stopped, revealing a gray metal door. Locked, Arya screamed, pulling on the handle. Vexa jammed her hand against the biometric scanner. Access denied. They locked us in, Vexa yelled. Jace slid across the floor to join them, firing blindly behind him to keep the attackers' heads down. Arya looked at the panel. It had a voice override. Scream at it, Vexa yelled. It responds to stress patterns in high-priority clients. Arya didn't hesitate. She channeled every ounce of fear, every night she had spent shivering in the cold, every moment of desperation. "Open the door!" she shrieked, her voice raw and terrifying. The AI registered the Class Alpha distress. Emergency override accepted. The door hissed open. "Go!" Jace shoved them through. They tumbled into a narrow, dimly lit concrete corridor. The contrast with the suite was jarring. This was the skeleton of the station. Jace spun around to seal the door, but a plasma bolt caught the edge of the frame, sending molten metal spraying. Another bolt hit Jace in the shoulder. He grunted, stumbling back, clutching his arm. Smoke rose from his uniform. "Jace!" Vexa screamed. "I am fine!" Jace grit his teeth, slamming the manual override. The door slammed shut, cutting off the gunfire. He slid down the wall, his face pale. The wound on his shoulder was ugly, cauterized around the edges but glowing with angry heat. Vexa dropped to her knees beside him. Her hands were shaking, but her training kicked in. "Let me see," she commanded. She placed her hand over the wound. Her palm began to glow with a soft, violet light, a bioelectric healing ability inherent to her species, but one that required immense energy. "It hurts," Jace rasped, staring at her face. "It will sting," Vexa whispered. "Focus on me." The contact was electric. Jace flinched, his back arching off the floor. The intimacy of it was shocking. Her energy flowing into his nerves, knitting flesh back together. For a moment, the world narrowed down to the two of them. Vexa felt his pain as if it were her own, and Jace felt her fear. Their eyes met. In the dirty, flickering light of the hallway, the barrier between guard and banker, human and alien, dissolved. "You stayed," Jace whispered, his voice strained. "You did not sign." "I chose a side," Vexa said, her voice trembling. The door behind them began to glow orange. They were cutting through. "We have to move," Arya said, her voice shaking. She was pulling at Vexa's sleeve. "Vexa, they are coming." Vexa broke the connection, gasping for breath. The wound was sealed, though Jace was still pale. "Can you walk?" Vexa asked. Jace nodded, hauling himself up. "I can run." They sprinted down the corridor, the sound of the door giving way echoing behind them. They burst out onto a service catwalk overlooking a massive vertical shaft. Below them, thousands of feet down, the maintenance tram zipped by like metal beetles. "There," Arya pointed. A cargo tram was slowing down at a subjunction. "Jump," Jace yelled. They vaulted over the railing. It was a 10-foot drop. They landed hard on the roof of the moving tram. Metal clanged. Arya slipped, her legs dangling over the edge of the abyss. Jace lunged, grabbing her wrist and hauling her back up. The tram accelerated, diving down into the dark underbelly of the station, away from the light, away from the luxury, and away from the life Vexa had known for 100 years. Vexa sat up, the wind whipping her hair. She looked back at the receding lights of the central branch. She had just kidnapped the richest person in the galaxy. She had assaulted a security team. She had betrayed her family. She looked at Jace, who was checking his ammo clip, and at Arya, who was laughing, a high, hysterical sound of pure survival. Vexa took a deep breath of the dirty, recycled air. It tasted like freedom. The service tram rattled and screeched as it descended into the bowels of the station, leaving the pristine silence of the upper levels far behind. The air grew thick and humid, tasting of recycled ozone, frying oil, and unwashed bodies. When the doors hissed open, they did not step onto marble. They stepped onto a grate that vibrated with the station's massive engines. This was Sector 0, the undercity that the holographic brochures promised did not exist. It was a canyon of neon and rust. Makeshift stalls were stacked atop one another like precarious metal favelas. selling everything from illegal biomods to unlabeled synthetic meat. Vexarai stepped off the tram and immediately flinched as a drop of condensation fell from an overhead pipe and landed on her cheek. She wiped it away with a trembling hand, her violet eyes wide. Her silk suit, tailored for boardrooms and galas, looked absurdly out of place against the grime. "Try not to touch anything," Jace muttered, scanning the crowd, "and try to look less like you are worth 1,000,000,000 credits." "I am trying," Vexa hissed, clutching her ruined jacket tighter. "But the floor is sticky." "Jace, why is the floor sticky?" "It is best not to ask," Arya said. She hopped off the tram with a natural ease, adjusting her backpack. She breathed in the smoggy air and looked around. "This place reminds me of the transit hub on Rigel 4, except with better lighting." Arya blended in. Despite her maroon jacket being too big, she moved with the rhythm of the street, avoiding eye contact but keeping her peripheral vision open. But Vexa stood like a beacon of high society, and Jace moved with the predatory grace of a soldier. People were looking. Eyes glittered from the shadows of noodle bars. A group of scavengers with cybernetic limbs paused their haggling to stare at the strange trio. "They know," Jace said, his hand hovering near his jacket pocket where his blaster was concealed. "We are too visible. We need to get to Rel's place. Now." They moved quickly through the labyrinth of the market. Vexa stumbled over a pile of discarded cooling coils and Arya caught her arm to steady her. "Just follow my feet," Arya whispered. "Step where I step." Vexa looked down at the human girl. Arya was navigating the filth as if it were a dance, her fear from the penthouse replaced by a grim competence. Vexa realized with a pang of guilt that this was Arya's natural element, survival mode. They ducked into a narrow alleyway illuminated by a flickering pink sign that read, "Repair Despair" in 3 languages. Jace hammered a rhythmic code on a rusted steel door. A slot slid open. A yellow reptilian eye peered out. "We are closed," a raspy voice croaked. "Unless you have Class A cooling fluid or a very good reason for waking me up. Open the door." "Rel," Jace said. The eye blinked. "Jace, you look terrible. You smell like ozone and burnt hair." "I was shot." "Rel, open the door." Bolts clanked, and the heavy door swung inward. Rel was a Viridian, a species known for their 4 arms and exceptional dexterity with microcircuits. He wore a grease-stained apron and protective goggles pushed up on his scaly forehead. His workshop was a chaotic nest of wires, disassembled droids, and stacks of ancient data servers humming with heat. Rel looked at the group as they shuffled inside. He looked at Jace, bleeding through a bandage. He looked at Vexa, the disgraced heiress shivering in the corner. He looked at Arya, the homeless girl clutching a backpack. "Well," Rel said, scratching his chin with a lower hand, "a banker, a bum, and a burned-out soldier walk into a lab. There is a punchline here somewhere, but I think it ends with me getting arrested for harboring fugitives. We need intel." "Rel," Jace said, moving to clear a space on a workbench so Vexa could sit. "And we need to stay off the grid." Rel sighed, moving a pile of optic sensors. "I heard the alerts. The whole station is buzzing. Terrorist attack on the central branch. Rogue security officer kidnaps client. They have put a bounty on your heads that could buy a small moon." He looked at Arya. "And you must be the golden goose, or the goose that lays the antimatter eggs." Arya offered a small, tired wave. "Hi." Rel grunted and spun his chair around to face a wall of monitors. "If I am going to die for abetting you, I at least want to know why." "Give me the chip." Arya handed him the battered data chip. Rel slotted it into a master drive. His 4 hands flew across 2 keyboards simultaneously. a blur of motion. I am bypassing the bank's external firewalls, Rel narrated, slipping through the back door of the archival subroutine. Ah, look at this. This code is old. It has dust on the encryption. Screens flickered to life, projecting holograms into the cluttered room. Documents, video logs, and transaction histories spiraled in the air. Rel whistled. This is not just a bank account, it is a treaty mechanism. The details began to resolve. The account had been established at the absolute end of the Orion War, 50 years ago. It was funded by a coalition of the core worlds, a guilt payment for the devastation they had rained down on the frontier. Here is the signatory, Rel pointed, Dr. Elias Solis. Arya gasped softly. A video log popped up. It was her father, decades younger, standing in a field of rubble on some distant world. He looked exhausted, shouting at a group of suited delegates. "We will not accept credit lines that tie us to your economy," the young Elias Solis shouted. "We want a sovereign trust, a fund that grows independently, untouchable by your political whims, until the frontier is ready to rebuild on its own terms." The hologram shifted. It showed the counter-signatories. Vexa froze. One of the delegates was an Antari with gemstone skin, the current chairman. But the other was a tall, elegant woman with constellation markings. "That is my grandmother," Vexa whispered, "Matriarch Lyra Rai." Rel dug deeper. "Look at these memos. House Rai lobbied to keep the physical location of the assets centralized here. They argued they would manage it for everyone's good." He pulled up a secure communication log, encrypted with the Rai family seal. Vexa read the text floating in the air. Memo, Security Council to House Rai. Subject, Asset Leverage. Content, the fund provides excellent leverage against the outer systems. As long as we hold the capital, the frontier governments must vote with us. If they dissent, we cite instability and freeze the disbursements. It was a weapon. The money wasn't just sitting there, it was being used to twist the arms of the very people it was meant to help. Then, a video file played. It was grainy footage of Vexa's grandfather, a figure she had been taught to revere as a philanthropist. He was speaking to a closed committee. "We must be pragmatic," the old man said, his voice smooth and cold. "The periphery worlds are chaotic. If a few million starve because we withhold funds to ensure political compliance, that is merely acceptable casualties in the service of stability." Vexa felt as if she had been slapped. The air left her lungs. She had grown up believing her family were the architects of peace. She had walked the halls of the bank with her head held high, believing in their mission. It was all a lie. She was not a guardian of prosperity. She was the heir to a dynasty of thieves and murderers. Vexa backed away until she hit a stack of servers. She wrapped her arms around herself, shaking. "I did not know," she whispered, her voice cracking. "I swear, I did not know." The room was silent. Jace looked at her with a mixture of pity and hardness. He knew what it was like to find out your orders were lies. Arya stepped forward. She walked through the ghostly hologram of Vexa's grandfather and stopped in front of Vexa. Vexa squeezed her eyes shut, waiting for the anger, waiting for the girl to scream at her. Instead, she felt a small, warm hand on her arm. Vexa opened her eyes. Arya was looking up at her, not with hate, but with a fierce, sad understanding. "He is not you," Arya said firmly. "He is my blood." Vexa choked out, "His name is my name. This filth is my inheritance." Arya squeezed her arm tighter. "My dad used to say that we are not our parents," Arya said. "We are just the people who have to clean up their mess." Guilt is useless, Vexa. It is just heavy luggage. It is only useful if it changes what you do next. Vexa looked at the human girl, this homeless, starving girl who had every right to despise her, and felt her heart break and reform in the same second. It changes everything, Vexa whispered, high above, in a room that smelled of lavender and money. Senator Kale stood before a holographic tribunal of House Rye elders. She has gone rogue, the current matriarch said, her voice dripping with disdain. Vexa has been compromised by the human soldier. She is emotionally unstable. She is a liability. Another elder agreed. She has accessed the forbidden archives. She knows the history. Senator Kale smoothed his silk cuffs. Then we are in agreement, Kale said. The Guardian arrangement is terminated. You have authorization to correct the error, the matriarch said coldly. Retrieve the girl. Secure the assets. And Vexa? She hesitated for only a fraction of a second. If she resists, she is to be treated as a hostile combatant. House Rye does not tolerate traitors. Kale smirked. A pleasure doing business with you. The safe house Rel arranged for them was a cramped storage unit 3 levels down. It smelled of hydraulic fluid and damp concrete. There was one mattress on the floor and a crate of nutrient paste. Jace was pacing the small space like a caged tiger. We need to move, Jace said. Rel is scrubbing our trail, but they will find us. We take a smuggler ship to the outer rim. We disappear. We find a rock where the bank has no satellites. And then what? Vexa asked. She was sitting on the mattress, cleaning the soot off her face with a rag. We hide in a cave for 50 years while the bank continues to strangle the galaxy? We survive. Vexa, Jace snapped, spinning on her. That is what soldiers do. We survive. And the debt? Vexa stood up, her eyes flashing. The billions of people my family is crushing? We just leave them? It is not your war, Jace yelled. It became my war the moment I saw those files, Vexa yelled back. She stepped into his space, her height nearly matching his. You want to be a martyr, Jace accused, his voice dropping to a dangerous growl. You want to wash away your family's sins with your own blood. That is not noble. Rye, it is suicide. You are just suddenly growing a conscience because you saw a bad video. Do not speak to me about conscience. Vexa spat. You were a soldier for the coalition. You enforced those blockades. You pulled the trigger for the very people you are now telling me to run from. Jace flinched. The words hit a target deep inside him. I followed orders, he said, his voice trembling with suppressed rage. So did I, Vexa shouted. And we were both wrong. They were standing inches apart, chests heaving. The anger in the room was palpable, thick and hot, but beneath the anger was something else, a magnetic, desperate pull. Jace stared at her. He looked at the fire in her violet eyes, the smudge of dirt on her cheekbone, the way her hands were clenched into fists. He had never seen her look so real. Vexa stared back. She saw the pain behind his gray eyes, the exhaustion, the terrifying intensity of a man who had nothing left to lose but her. The air crackled between them. It would take only one movement, a step forward, a hand reaching out, to turn the fight into something else entirely. Arya said from the doorway. They both snapped their heads toward her, startled. Arya was holding up a handful of credits she had scavenged from Vexa's jacket pocket. I am going to... Go find food, Arya said, looking between them with wide, knowing eyes. And maybe walk around the block, or 2 blocks. Take your time. Take your time deciding the plan. She gave them a jagged grin and slipped out the door before they could stop her. The silence that followed was heavy. Jace let out a long breath and ran a hand through his hair. She is going to get herself killed, he muttered, but he didn't move to follow her. Vexa sat back down on the mattress, the fight draining out of her, leaving only exhaustion. She is tougher than us, Vexa said softly. Jace looked at her. He walked over slowly and sat on the crate opposite her. I did not mean what I said, Jace admitted quietly. About your conscience. Yes, you did, Vexa said. And you were right. I have been blind. Willfully blind. Jace shook his head. I have watched you for 3 years. Vexa, you were never like them. You treated the staff like people. You remembered the cleaners' birthdays, and you hated the galas. Vexa looked up, surprised. You noticed? I notice everything about you, Jace said. The words hung in the air, stripped of armor. Vexa's breath hitched. I noticed you too, she whispered. The soldier who never smiled, who stood between me and the crowd like a shield. She reached out, her fingers trembling, and touched the bandage on his shoulder. You are hurt because of me. I have been hurt for a long time, Jace said, his voice rough. Vexa moved her hand from his shoulder to his jaw. Her skin was cool against his stubble. Jace turned his face into her palm, closing his eyes. It was a gesture of surrender that shattered Vexa's heart. No one has ever touched me without wanting something, Vexa whispered. My family wants loyalty. The clients want access. What do you want, Jace? Jace opened his eyes. They were dark, dilated. I want you to stay alive, he said. And I want... He didn't finish the sentence. He leaned forward and she met him. The kiss was not graceful. It was a collision. It tasted of adrenaline and fear and long-buried need. Jace's hands found her waist, pulling her off the mattress and into him. Vexa clung to his jacket, her fingers tangling in his hair. It was a desperate affirmation of life in the face of death. Vexa made a sound in her throat, a soft whimper of release, as if she had been holding her breath for a century. They broke apart, gasping, foreheads resting against each other. Jace, Vexa breathed, her eyes closed. If we get through this, Jace murmured, brushing his thumb over her cheekbone. If we live. I want more. Not just this. I want time. I want to know who you are when you are not running for your life. Vexa opened her eyes. Violet meeting gray. I want that too. She promised. They stayed there for a moment, suspended in the eye of the storm, before the reality of their situation came crashing back. Arya, Vexa said, pulling back reluctantly. We need to find Arya. Arya was having the time of her life, which was a low bar considering her previous week. She was wandering the night market of Sector 4. It was a sensory overload of sizzling woks, thumping bass music, and holographic dancers. For the first time in her life, she had buying power. She had found a small anonymous credit chip in the pocket of the jacket she stole, likely spare change for the previous owner, but a fortune for her. She stopped at a stall selling grilled lizard skewers. A group of 4 street kids, thin and ragged, were watching the food with hungry eyes, counting their copper coins. Arya felt a phantom ache in her own stomach. She knew that look. She walked up to the vendor. I will take 20 skewers, Arya said, and 5 nutrient packs, the expensive ones. The vendor, a 4-eyed insectoid, eyed her suspiciously. You have credits? Tunnel rat? Arya slapped the chip on the counter. It chimed with a verified payment. Keep the change, she said. She handed the steaming bundles of food to the shocked kids. Eat up, she told them, and do not trust anyone who smiles too wide. She turned to leave, feeling a warm glow in her chest. That glow vanished when she saw the reflection in a shop window. 3 figures were moving through the crowd behind her. They were not wearing bank uniforms. They wore sleek, matte black armor with no insignia. They moved with coordinated precision. Mercenaries. They spotted her reflection. "Target acquired," one of them said, his voice amplified by a helmet speaker. Arya didn't wait. She bolted. She dove under a hovering fruit cart, sending alien melons rolling everywhere. "Sorry," she shouted as she scrambled up and sprinted toward the hanging bridges. The mercenaries pursued, shoving people aside. A laser bolt sizzled past Arya's ear, scorching a hole in a neon sign. She hit the bridge, a swaying structure of metal cables suspended over a 100-foot drop to the reactor level. She scrambled up the suspension cables, her street agility saving her life. She leaped from the cable to a scaffolding platform, swinging like a primate. "Stop!" the mercenary leader shouted, raising a rifle. Arya ducked behind a crate of engine parts. She was cornered. The 3 mercenaries advanced on the platform, blocking the exit. Nowhere to go. "Little heiress," the leader sneered. Suddenly, a heavy boot slammed into the leader's chest. Jace dropped from the shadows of the ventilation ducts above, landing in a crouch. He fired his blaster point blank, taking down the second mercenary. "Get away from her!" Jace roared. Vexa appeared on the walkway above, her data pad glowing in her hand. "Jace, get clear!" Vexa shouted. She tapped a sequence into her pad. Rel had given her the backdoor codes to the sector's environmental controls. She executed the command. Gravity nullification. Localized instantly. The laws of physics broke. The mercenaries, Jace, Arya, and the crates of engine parts lifted off the ground. "Whoa!" Arya screamed, flailing as she drifted upward. The mercenaries panicked, their boots losing traction. They spun helplessly in the air. Jace, used to zero-G combat, kicked off a floating crate, propelling himself toward Arya. She was drifting dangerously close to the open edge of the platform, where the ventilation fans were churning. "Gotcha!" Jace grabbed her by the back of her jacket. He pulled her into his chest, wrapping one arm around her. "Vexa, now!" Jace shouted into his comms. Vexa hit the command, "Gravity normalize!" The world slammed back down. The mercenaries crashed hard onto the metal grating, knocking the wind out of them. Jace landed in a controlled roll, cushioning Arya's fall. They scrambled up before the mercenaries could recover. "Run!" Vexa yelled, leading the way. They didn't stop running until they reached a decommissioned docking bay Rel had directed them to. A small, battered transport ship sat there, its engines humming. They piled inside, breathless. Jace slammed the airlock shut and sprinted to the cockpit. "Get us out of here!" Arya yelled, buckling herself into a jump seat. The ship shuddered and lifted off, blasting out of the docking port just as the black armored figures burst through the bay doors, firing uselessly at the hull. As the stars streaked into view, silence settled over the cockpit. Arya unbuckled her belt and stood up. She was shaking. "I almost died," she said, her voice high and tight. "Again." "We got you," Vexa said, reaching out a hand. "Do not." Arya slapped her hand away. The anger flared up, hot and sudden. "I did not ask for this. I did not ask for the money. I did not ask to be chased by hit squads. I just wanted a sandwich." She paced the small cabin, tears streaming down her dirty face. "My dad. He left me a death sentence. He did not save me. He cursed me." "Arya," Vexa said gently, standing up. "Running will not work. You saw them. They tracked you to the market in an hour. They will hunt you to the edge of the universe." "So what?" Arya cried. "We just die?" "No," Vexa said. "We change the rules. She pulled up the final piece of data Rel had given them on the ship's console. There is a physical vault, Vexa explained. It is on the archive moon of Ethelgard. It contains the original hard copy treaties of the Reparations Fund. And, Jace asked, stabilizing the ship's course. And a failsafe, Vexa said. My grandfather hated it, but the Coalition insisted. The heir, you, Arya, can physically access the vault. If you do, you can rewrite the terms of the fund. You can restructure it. You can release the money directly to the people, bypassing the bank entirely. Arya sniffed, wiping her nose on her sleeve. I can change it? You can break their control, Vexa said. But we have to go there. We have to break into the most secure facility in the sector. Arya looked at Vexa. Then she looked at the stars outside. Okay, Arya said, her voice steadying. Let's go break into a moon. As the small ship engaged its warp drive, disappearing into a streak of white light, a sensor buoy floating nearby pinged. On the bridge of a massive dreadnought orbiting the station, Senator Kyle watched the blip on his screen. He smiled. They are heading for the archive, Kyle said to his admiral. Should we intercept? The admiral asked. No, Kyle said. Let them go. Let them open the door for us to prepare the fleet. We will meet them there. The archive moon of Ethelgard was not a place for the living. It was a graveyard of numbers. The moon itself was a desolate sphere of gray rock, pockmarked by asteroid strikes from 1,000,000 years ago. There was no atmosphere, no wind, no sound. The only sign of civilization was the complex carved directly into the crater of the largest impact site. It was a brutalist wedge of black metal that glowed with a cold, pulsating blue light, like a slow heartbeat in the vacuum. Inside the cockpit of their stolen transport, Jace Coven watched the sensor array light up with warnings. We are being painted, Jace said, his hands flying over the controls. Automated defense grid, Class 4 particle cannons. They will vaporize us before we touch the ground. Vexa Rai leaned over his shoulder. She looked pale, the strain of the last 12 hours showing in the tightness around her eyes, but her voice was steady. Transmit this code, Vexa said, tapping a long string of alphanumeric characters into the comms buffer. It is an executive override. House Rai clearance. Are you sure it will work? Arya asked from the jump seat, clutching her backpack straps. Or will it just tell them exactly where to shoot? It will work, Vexa said grimly. But it will also light up a board in the central bank like a supernova. They will know exactly where we are. Do it, Jace said. Better to be found than vaporized. He hit the transmit key. For a terrifying second, the targeting lock remained red. Then, it turned green. The massive hangar doors on the moon's surface began to grind open, revealing a landing bay bathed in sterile white light. We are in. Jace breathed. The interior of the archive was a cathedral of data. They walked down a central aisle that seemed to stretch for miles. On either side, towering spires of black crystal rose into the darkness above. Each spire hummed with a low-frequency vibration that rattled Arya's teeth. The air was frigid, kept at near zero temperatures to preserve the superconducting cores. As they walked, the air around them flickered. Ghostly holograms, recordings of past negotiations blinked into existence, triggered by their motion sensors. A spectral diplomat from the Rigel system argued silently with a translucent banker. A ghostly general pointed at a star map. It is like a haunted house, Arya whispered, shivering. But for accountants, they are not ghosts, Vexa said, her voice echoing in the vast space. They are memories. Everything the bank has ever done, every deal, every betrayal is stored here. She led them to a heavy circular door marked with the emblem of the Orion Coalition, the foundational treaty vault, Vexa said. She placed her palm on the scanner. The system recognized her DNA, but hesitated. A red light blinked. "Please state intent," a synthetic voice echoed. "Audit," Vexa said clearly. "Authorization Rye Alpha 9. The door groaned and hissed open. Inside, the room was smaller, more intimate. In the center stood a single pedestal holding a physical book, an ancient leather-bound tome, and a crystal data shard. Arya walked toward it slowly. She reached out and touched the book. "It is paper," she said, surprised. "The original treaty," Vexa said. "Signed in ink. It is harder to hack ink." A holographic projector above the pedestal hummed to life. A video began to play. It was Arya's father. But he wasn't the tired, broken man she remembered from the chip. He was fiery, his eyes blazing with conviction. He was standing in this very room, shouting at Vexa's grandfather. "I will not let you turn this fund into a leash," Elias Solis roared. "The reparations belong to the people who lost their homes, not to the banks who financed the bombs." The recording showed Vexa's grandfather smiling, a cold, reptile smile. "We need a structure. Elias," the old man said smoothly. "A committee?" "No committee." Elias slammed his fist on the table. "A committee can be bought. A committee can be pressured. I want a single heir, one living, breathing human conscience to hold the key. Someone who feels pain, someone who knows what it is like to be hungry." The video cut out. Arya stood frozen. Tears streamed down her face, hot and fast. "He knew," she whispered. "He knew they would come for me. That is why he hid me. That is why we moved every 6 months. He carried this whole thing. Alone." She sank to her knees, overwhelmed by the weight of her father's love and his terrifying expectations. Vexa dropped down beside her, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. Jace knelt on the other side, his hand resting on Arya's back. "He believed in you," Vexa said softly, "not because of your blood, but because he knew you would survive." Arya leaned into Vexa, sobbing. For a moment, amidst the cold data and the dark history, they were just 3 people huddled together against the universe. A tableau of found family forged in fire. High above the moon, space tore open. A fleet of warships, sleek and predatory, dropped out of warp. They bore the insignia of the Galactic Senate, but their transponder codes belonged to private security firms owned by the bank. On the bridge of the lead dreadnought, Senator Kale smoothed his silver hair. "Contact the Archive AI," Kale ordered. "Inform it that we are here to secure a critical asset under the Stability Preservation Act." "Sir," the communications officer said, "the AI is citing the Sovereign Protocol. It says we cannot enter without the heir's permission." Kale smiled thinly. "Override it. Use the emergency back door. Tell the AI there is a biological contaminant in the vault, a virus. We are the cure." Inside the vault, Vexa was reading a scrolling holographic document. "Here it is," she said, her eyes widening. "The failsafe. What does it do?" Jace asked, standing guard at the door. "It allows the heir to rewrite the terms of the fund," Vexa explained. "But it is not just a button press. It is a ritual. It requires a biometric lock, blood, and a spoken oath." "And then?" Arya asked, wiping her eyes. "And then it broadcasts the new terms to every signatory world simultaneously. It locks them in, irrevocably." Vexa looked at the 2 of them. "If you do this, Arya, you can change everything. You can wipe out debts. You can fund terraforming for 1,000 worlds. You can break the bank's monopoly on them." "We should do it," Jace said instantly. "Wipe the slate clean. Crash their system." "It is not that simple," Vexa countered, her banker's mind kicking in. "If you erase all debt overnight, the credit markets will collapse. Supply chains will break. People will starve. Jace, chaos is not justice." So we just leave it? Jace argued, his voice rising. We let them keep their boot on everyone's neck because we are afraid of a little chaos? A little chaos? Vexa stood up, facing him. We are talking about galactic famine. We need to be surgical. We need to restructure, not destroy. You sound like them, Jace accused. You sound like a Rye, and you sound like a soldier who only knows how to blow things up, Vexa shouted back. They were inches apart again, the tension from the safe house flaring back to life, hotter this time. The stakes were higher. I am trying to save lives, Jace yelled. So am I, Vexa screamed. They were breathing hard, glaring at each other. The anger was fierce, but beneath it was the terrifying realization that they were on opposite sides of the one thing that mattered. And yet they could not stop looking at each other's lips. Jace leaned in, his eyes dropping to her mouth. Vexa tilted her head up, her hands clenching into fists at her sides. It was a magnetic, destructive pull. Hey, Arya shouted. They both jumped, looking at her. Are you two going to make out, or are we going to save the galaxy? Arya asked, her arms crossed. Because I am confused and a little uncomfortable. Vexa flushed a deep violet. Jace coughed, turning away to check his weapon. Sorry, Jace muttered. We need a plan, Vexa stammered. The plan is moot, Jace said, looking at his sensor readout. They are here. The breach was not subtle. The heavy blast doors of the complex blew inward with a deafening roar. Debris rained down from the ceiling. Jace shoved Arya and Vexa behind the pedestal as a squad of Kale's elite guards stormed the room. Red laser sights cut through the dust. Hold your fire, a smooth voice commanded. Senator Kale walked through the smoke. He wore a white encounter suit, looking immaculate amidst the destruction. He was flanked by 2 combat droids. Arya Solis, Kale said, spreading his hands. So good to finally meet you. You have your father's eyes, and his stubbornness. Jace leveled his blaster at Kale's head. Take one more step and I will repaint the wall with your brains. Now, now, Kale tisked. Violence is so primitive. He tapped his wrist, and a holographic projection sprang up in the center of the room. It showed the Rye family elders, sitting in their high tower. Vexa. Her grandmother's voice cut through the air. Stand down. You are embarrassing this family. Grandmother, Vexa said, stepping out from behind the pedestal. I am trying to save this family's soul. You have no soul. Child, the matriarch spat. You have assets, and you are squandering them. Support Senator Kale. Bring the girl to us. We will give you a seat on the High Council. You can shape the galaxy. Vexa, instead of running from it. Kale turned to Arya. Here is the deal. My dear, you sign a temporary power-sharing agreement. You give the Stability Council, that is me, oversight of the fund. In exchange, you live. You become a hero. We will build statues of you. We will say you united the core and the frontier. And if I refuse? Arya asked, her voice trembling but her chin high. Kyle smiled. Then you are a terrorist who stole a national treasure. We will kill your soldier. We will imprison Vexa for treason. And you, well, accidents happen in deep space. Vexa looked at Kale. She looked at the hologram of her family. She looked at Jace, who was ready to die fighting. She saw the odds. 3 against a fleet. I accept, Vexa said quietly. Jace spun around. What? Vexa ignored him. She walked toward Kale, her hands raised. I accept the deal. Senator, I will convince her to sign, but I want full immunity, and I want a position on the oversight board. Vexa, Jace shouted, betrayal written across his face. You cannot do this. Vexa turned to him, her eyes cold and empty. I am a banker. Jace, I know when to cut my losses. She turned to Arya. Sign the paper. Arya, it is over. Arya looked at Vexa. She saw the mask of the cold, unfeeling elite that Vexa had worn when they first met. But she also saw the slight tremble in Vexa's left hand. Arya's heart hammered. She remembered what Vexa had said in the penthouse. Do not trust them. Okay, Arya whispered. I will sign. Kale beamed. Excellent. A victory for pragmatism. He snapped his fingers and a drone floated forward with a digital tablet. As Arya took the stylus, Vexa leaned in close, pretending to adjust the girl's collar. Whatever happens, Vexa breathed, so quietly that only Arya could hear. Remember that nothing is irreversible until you speak your oath in your own words. Arya froze. She looked at Vexa's eyes. The coldness was gone, replaced by a desperate, burning intensity. Arya understood. It was a play. She signed the tablet. Done, Arya said, handing it back. Kyle checked the signature. Perfect. Take them away. The separation was brutal. Guards grabbed Arya, dragging her toward a waiting shuttle. Take the girl to the secure quarters, Kale ordered. Jace fought. He broke one guard's nose with an elbow strike, but a neural whip lashed out, wrapping around his chest. He screamed as electricity surged through him, dropping him to his knees. Jace, Arya screamed. Take the soldier to interrogation, Kale said dismissively. Find out who else they talked to. And Vexa. Kale offered her his arm. Walk with me, my dear. We have details to finalize. Jace watched through a haze of pain as Vexa took the senator's arm and walked away without looking back. The interrogation room was a white box of pain. Jace was strapped into a neural chair. Metal clamps held his wrists and head. A probe was drilling into his memories, triggering synapses of agony. He gritted his teeth, sweat pouring down his face. Kale strolled in, looking bored. You are a resilient thing, Kyle observed, but ultimately pointless. Where is she? Jace rasped. Arya? She is being prepped for the broadcast. Vexa. Jace spat. Ah, Vexa? Kale smiled. She is with her own kind now. You really thought she loved you? A soldier with dirt under his fingernails? She used you. Jace. She needed a bodyguard. Now she needs a partner. You are lying, Jace groaned. Am I? She signed the deal. She is in the conference room right now, carving up the galaxy with her grandmother. You were just a pet. Kale leaned in close. And the sad part is you failed. You could not save the girl, and you could not save yourself. Jace stared at him. The physical pain was nothing compared to the black hole opening in his chest. But inside that black hole, a spark ignited. It wasn't hope. It was pure, unadulterated rage. I will kill you, Jace whispered. Kyle patted his cheek. I am sure you would try. He turned and left the room, the door sealing with a hiss. In the conference room, Vexa stood before the life-sized hologram of her family. You have done well to come to your senses, Grandfather said. Vexa looked at them. She looked at their expensive robes, their jewelry, their smug expressions. I read the files, Vexa said softly. Excuse me? Her grandmother asked. The files. The starvation blockades on Ceres. The engineered plague on Tython to lower stock prices. I read it all. Necessary measures. Her grandfather dismissed. Stability requires a firm hand. It is not stability, Vexa shouted, her voice cracking. It is cruelty. You dress it up in suits and call it economics, but it is just murder. The elders fell silent. Senator Kale entered the room, clapping slowly. A passionate speech. Kale said, but irrelevant. The girl has signed. We have the control. Vexa took a deep breath. She let her shoulders drop. She forced a smile, a slow, seductive curve of her lips that she had learned from watching court courtesans. You are right, Senator, she purred. The game is won. She walked toward him, swaying her hips slightly. She reached out and straightened his lapel, her fingers brushing against the comms link on his chest. I suppose I am just overwrought, Vexa said, batting her lashes. It has been a long day. I just want to ensure my position is secure. Kale looked down at her. He saw a beautiful, broken woman looking for a protector. He relaxed. Your position is secure, Vexa, as long as you remain useful. I can be very useful, Vexa whispered. She leaned in, as if to kiss his cheek. Show me the final sequence. For the broadcast, I want to be ready. Kyle chuckled. He pulled up his wrist computer. Simple. Access code Alpha 70. Then confirm. Vexa watched his fingers. She memorized the sequence. And then, she brushed her hand against his wrist unit, a tiny data leech concealed in her palm, a gift from Rel she had kept hidden. Sucked the encryption keys in a microsecond. Thank you, Vexa said, pulling back. She stepped away from him. Her smile vanished like smoke. Her face went hard as stone. What is wrong? Kale asked, sensing the shift. I choose her, Vexa said loud enough for the hologram to hear. I choose Arya. I choose the people who starve so you can buy new planets. And I choose the soldier you are torturing right now. The elders gasped. You are disowned, her grandmother shrieked. You are no longer Rai. Good, Vexa said. She tapped the stolen code into the room's control panel. Overload security grid. Localized surge. The room exploded with sparks. The lights blew out. Kyle shouted as his personal shield generator shorted, throwing him backward. Vexa didn't escape unscathed. An exploding console sent a shard of glass slicing into her arm. She cried out, clutching the wound, blood seeping through her fingers. But the door was open. She ran. The corridor was a blur of red emergency lights. Vexa ignored the pain in her arm. She ignored the alarms. She had to get to Jace. She knew the layout of the complex from the files. Interrogation was 2 levels down. She encountered a guard at the stairwell. He raised his rifle. Vexa didn't slow down. She used a move Jace had taught her in the gym months ago. A low slide, kicking his legs out from under him. As he fell, she grabbed his stun baton and jammed it into his neck armor. He went down. She scrambled down the stairs, gasping for air. She reached the white door. It was locked. Vexa used Kale's stolen codes. The lock clicked green. She burst inside. Jace was slumped in the chair, his head hanging low. He looked broken. Jace! Vexa cried. She ran to him, her hands flying over the neural rig's controls. She ripped the sensors off his temples. Jace groaned, lifting his head. His eyes were unfocused, swimming with pain. No, he mumbled. Not real. Hallucination. I am real. Vexa sobbed, cupping his face with her bloody hands. Jace, look at me. I am here. Jace blinked. He saw the blood on her arm. He smelled her perfume mixed with smoke. Vexa, he croaked. You left. You went with him. I had to, she whispered, frantically undoing the wrist clamps. I had to get the codes. I had to make them think I broke so they would drop their guard. I am sorry. I am so sorry. The clamps sprang open. Jace fell forward and she caught him. He buried his face in her neck, shaking uncontrollably. I thought I lost you, he whispered, his voice raw. Never, Vexa vowed. She pulled back, looking into his eyes. He looked at her, bruised, bleeding, fierce, and utterly his. The rage in his chest vanished, replaced by a surge of overwhelming relief and desire. He grabbed the back of her head and pulled her down. The kiss was fierce, salty with tears and blood. It was a reclaiming. It was a promise. They broke apart as the hallway alarms intensified. We have to go, Jace said, his strength returning with the adrenaline. Arya. Vexa nodded, helping him stand. She slipped the stun baton into his hand. Let's go get our girl, she said. Together. They stumbled out into the chaos, heading for the heart of the complex to rewrite the fate of the galaxy. The corridor leading to the detention block was a kill zone of overlapping fields of fire. But Vexa Rai navigated it like she was auditing a fraudulent ledger. She ran with a datapad clamped in her bloody hand, her eyes darting between the physical reality of the hallway and the digital architecture of the complex overlaid on her contact lenses. 3 elite guards turned the corner ahead, raising pulse rifles. Audit Protocol 44, Vexa shouted, swiping a sharp diagonal across her screen. Asset freeze. The heavy blast doors on either side of the guards slammed shut with the force of a hydraulic press, trapping them in a crushing embrace. They didn't die, but their armor locked up in emergency stasis, freezing them in place like statues. Jace didn't wait to admire her work. He vaulted over the immobilized guards, his boots ringing on the metal floor. He was moving with a terrifying, limping speed, fueled by adrenaline and the lingering agony of the neural chair. 2 more hostiles at the intersection, Jace yelled. He dropped to a slide, firing the stun baton he had modified into a projectile weapon. The charge hit the first guard in the throat, dropping him. The second guard fired, a plasma bolt scorching the air inches from Vexa's ear. Jace rolled, coming up in a crouch, and threw a flashbang grenade he had scavenged from the interrogation room. The hallway turned white. Jace moved into the blindness, a blur of violence, using the guard's own momentum to slam him into the wall. Clear, Jace rasped, wiping blood from his nose. You are efficient, Vexa said, catching up to him, her chest heaving. You are terrifying, Jace countered, glancing at the frozen guards. Remind me never to be late on a loan payment. They reached the door to the secure protection chamber. It was sealed with a Class 10 lock, a mechanism designed to hold political prisoners and volatile biological samples. Vexa raised her hand to begin the decryption, but the door panel was already sparking. Smoke curled from the seams. Inside, they heard a grunt of exertion and the sound of metal snapping. The door hissed, tried to cycle, failed, and then groaned open halfway. Arya Solis squeezed through the gap, holding a charred piece of wiring and a spoon she had sharpened against the floor. She looked wild, her hair standing up with static, her eyes blazing. You guys took your time, Arya said, tossing the spoon away. I was about to hotwire the ventilation system and crawl out through the ducts. Arya. Vexa dropped her datapad and grabbed the girl. It wasn't a polite, aristocratic embrace. It was a collision. Jace wrapped his arms around both of them, burying his face in Arya's messy hair. For a moment, they just held on. 3 broken people in a hallway full of smoke. I thought you left, Arya mumbled into Vexa's shoulder. I saw you walk away. I had to, Vexa whispered fiercely, pulling back to cup Arya's face. I had to make them believe I was one of them. I would never leave you. I swear it on my name. I swear it on my life. Arya looked at Jace. You look terrible. You should see the other guys. Jace managed a weak grin. They are currently frozen in a hallway. A deep, booming sound vibrated through the floor plates. Holographic projectors all along the corridor flickered to life. Senator Kale's face, 20 feet high, appeared in the air. Citizens of the galaxy, Kale's voice thundered, smooth and reassuring. It is my great honor to announce a new era of stability. The heir to the Orion Fund has graciously agreed to a partnership. The image shifted. It showed Arya, or rather, a digitally manipulated deep fake of Arya, standing next to Kale, wearing elegant robes, smiling vacantly. I am happy to serve, the fake Arya said. Her voice a perfect soulless copy, and that is creepy, the real Arya said, shivering. I do not smile like that. I smile like I am plotting something. He is starting the transfer, Vexa said, panic edging into her voice. He is using the preliminary agreement you signed to initiate a total takeover. We have maybe 10 minutes before he locks down the fund permanently. How do we stop him? Jace asked. He has a fleet. The core, Vexa said, turning to face the dark end of the hallway. The broadcast is a layer of code. We need to go deeper. If Arya physically interfaces with the central core, the heart of the archive, and speaks the heir's oath, it overrides everything. It is a biological imperative written into the station's foundation. Then let's go, Jace said, reloading his weapon. It is not just a room. Jace, Vexa warned. The core is protected by financial anomalies. Financial what? Arya asked. Money is energy, Vexa said grimly. When you concentrate this much potential wealth in one physical space, it distorts reality. You will see. They moved deeper into the complex. The architecture began to change. The clean lines of the archive gave way to shifting, geometric fractals. The air grew heavy, tasting of copper and electricity. They reached a maintenance bay just outside the perimeter of the core. The hum of the machine was deafening here, a sound like a million voices whispering numbers. Wait, Vexa said, pulling them into the shadows of a turbine. Kale has deployed the Praetorian Guard. I can see their heat signatures ahead. We need Rel. She tapped her comms. Rel? Are you there? A flickering blue hologram of the four-armed hacker popped up from her wrist unit. I am here, Rel's voice crackled. And might I add, your bounties have just doubled. I should turn you in and buy a planet. Focus, Rel, Jace said. We need a path to the core. I am looking, Rel said, his hands moving in the hologram. The main entrance is a kill box, but there is a data cooling vent. It cycles every 3 minutes. If you time it right, you can slip through the maintenance gaps. We will take it, Vexa said. She looked at Jace. His hand was trembling slightly, not from fear. She knew, but from the aftershocks of the neural torture. Jace, Vexa said softly. He looked at her. In the dim blue light of the maintenance bay, with enemies closing in and the galaxy hanging in the balance, the rest of the world seemed to fall away. They were both breathing hard. The chase, the lies, the violence, it had stripped away all the pretense. I am terrified, Jace admitted, his voice low. Not of dying. I made peace with that years ago. I am terrified of losing you. Vexa reached out and touched the bandage on his neck. Loving someone in the middle of a war is insane, Jace whispered. It is the only thing that makes sense, Vexa replied, her voice shaking. Before this, before you, I was just a function. I was a Rye. I was a set of expectations in a silk suit. With you, I feel real. I feel like I exist. Jace let out a ragged breath. He stepped closer, crowding her against the turbine housing. Then let's exist, he said. He kissed her. It wasn't like the kiss in the safe house. That had been desperate. This was possessive. It was a claim. Jace's hands tangled in her hair, pulling her head back, his mouth devouring hers. Vexa made a sound of surrender, her hands gripping the lapels of his ruined uniform, pulling him closer until there was no air between them. The kiss went on, deep and hungry, fueled by the terrifying knowledge that this might be the last time they ever touched. It was a mingling of breath and blood, a rejection of the cold mathematics of the bank in favor of raw, messy human heat. Vexa's fingers traced the scar on his jaw, her touch trembling. She wanted to memorize him. She wanted to crawl inside his skin and stay there. Promise me, she whispered against his lips. Promise me we get to be boring after this. I want to be boring with you. I promise, Jace rasped, pressing his forehead to hers. I will be the most boring man you ever met. They pulled back, just an inch, eyes locked, pupils dilated. The air around them crackled with unspent energy. Arya was standing by the door, watching them. She had a small, crooked smile on her face. She looked a little lonely, but mostly she looked relieved. Are you two done? Arya asked gently. Because I would really like to save the rest of that for after we rewrite the universe. Vexa flushed, smoothing her hair, but she didn't let go of Jace's hand. Right, Vexa said, her voice steadying. The universe. The final approach to the core was a nightmare of distorted physics. As they entered the outer ring, the financial anomalies Vexa had warned them about manifested. Watch your step, Vexa shouted. Gravity shear. The hallway ahead twisted like a ringed towel. The floor became the wall. This was a manifestation of high-risk volatility, the sheer weight of the algorithm warping the graviton plating. Vexa raised her hand, her interface glowing. She didn't fight the gravity. She manipulated the market data feeding it. Injecting stability liquidity, she yelled. She dumped a packet of dummy transactions into the local node. The hallway snapped back to reality with a sickening lurch. Run! They sprinted across the metal grating. Time lag! Rel shouted over the comms. Incoming latency spike. Suddenly, Jace was moving in slow motion. The air turned to molasses. He was running, but his legs moved like he was underwater. A squad of Kale's troopers appeared at the far end of the hall. They fired. The plasma bolts moved slowly, drifting through the air like lazy fireflies. It is a temporal distortion caused by transaction lag, Vexa explained, her own voice dropping an octave, sounding slow and warped. Do not get hit. Jace adjusted instantly. He treated the slow bolts as physical obstacles, weaving between them with surreal grace. He raised his weapon and fired, his shots, unaffected by the incoming lag because he was inside the bubble, sped out and struck the troopers at normal speed. The troopers dropped before they realized they were dead. We are clear, Jace shouted as the time pocket collapsed, the world rushing back to normal speed with a dizzying snap. They reached a blast door guarded by a heavy mech suit. I cannot hack that, Vexa yelled. It is analog. Leave it to me, Arya shouted. She stepped out from cover. Hey, you! Arya screamed at the mech. The machine swiveled its cannons toward her. I already moved the funds, Arya yelled, waving her hands. I transferred the entire balance to a shadow account in the Crab Nebula. If you shoot me, the encryption key dies and nobody gets paid. Not even you. The mech pilot hesitated. Greed was a universal language. You moved it? The pilot's amplified voice boomed. You think I am stupid? Arya scoffed. Of course I moved it. Check your payroll feed. It is already pending. For 2 seconds. The pilot was distracted, checking his internal HUD. That was all Jace needed. He slid under the mech's legs and slapped a shaped charge onto the hydraulic knee joint. Move. They dove for cover as the charge blew. The mech toppled over with a screech of tearing metal, crashing through the blast door and creating a ramp. That was a lie, right? Vexa asked as they scrambled over the smoking wreckage. Total lie. Arya grinned, breathless. I do not even know where the Crab Nebula is. The core was not a room. It was an event horizon. They burst into a spherical chamber larger than a stadium. There was no floor, only a narrow bridge of light extending toward the center. Below them, above them, and around them, rivers of luminous numbers flowed like liquid mercury, trillions of transactions, contracts, and debts swirled in a chaotic, beautiful storm. In the center of the sphere hovered a pulsing heart of pure white energy, the master ledger. And standing on the bridge, blocking the path, was Senator Kale. He was flanked by 10 members of the Praetorian Guard, their armor gleaming gold, their weapons leveled. "End of the line," Kyle said. His voice was amplified by the room's acoustics, booming from everywhere at once. He looked at Arya. "You are persistent, child. I will give you that. But look around you. This is the lifeblood of the galaxy. Do you really think I will let you poison it with your naive morality?" Arya stepped out onto the bridge. The light felt solid under her boots. The air hummed with so much static that the hair on her arm stood up. "It is not poison," Arya called out. "It is medicine. And you are the disease." Kyle laughed. He gestured to the swirling data storm. "I have a failsafe linked to my heartbeat," Kyle announced. "If I die, or if you attempt to alter the fund without my code, I trigger a liquidity freeze. Every bank in the core sectors will shut down. Trade will stop. Supply ships will halt. Within a week, 3 systems will starve." He smiled, cruel and victorious. "It is a hostage situation, Arya, and the hostages are everyone you ever wanted to save." Vexa froze. She checked her data feed. "He is not lying," Vexa whispered to Jace. "He has rigged the system to crash." Jace gripped his weapon. "We can't shoot him." Arya looked at Kale. Then she looked at the floating cameras, the drones Kale was using to broadcast his triumph. "Is the feed live?" Arya asked quietly. "Yes," Vexa said. "The whole galaxy is watching." Arya stepped forward. She didn't look at Kale. She looked directly into the camera lens of the nearest drone. "Can you hear me?" Arya asked. Her voice was small, but in the acoustic perfection of the core, it rang like a bell. "I am Arya Solis, and I am standing in front of the man who says he owns your future." Kale frowned. "Cut the feed," he barked. But Rel was in the system. The feed stayed live. "He says that if he does not get his way, he will starve you," Arya continued, her voice gaining strength. "He says he will crash the ships and freeze the accounts. He is holding a gun to the head of the galaxy and asking you to thank him for it." She pointed at Kyle. "If one man can destroy your life just because he is angry, then the system is already broken. If we are all just hostages to his greed, then we are already dead." She took a step closer to Kale. "I am not afraid of you," she said, "and neither are they." Kale's face twisted in rage. The facade of the benevolent leader cracked. "Kill her!" Kale screamed. "Fire!" The Praetorian guards hesitated for a fraction of a second, swayed by the girl's words, but their conditioning took over. They raised their rifles. Jace moved. It was pure instinct. No thought, no calculation. He saw the barrel rise. He saw Arya standing exposed, and he threw himself into the path. "No!" Vexa screamed. A bolt of red plasma caught Jace in the chest. The impact lifted him off his feet. He crashed backward onto the bridge of light, sliding toward the edge. "Jace!" Vexa fell to her knees beside him. Her hands hovered over the smoking wound in his chest armor. He was gasping, blood bubbling at his lips. Arya stared, horror-struck. Kale laughed. "A messy end for a messy little man. Finish them." Something inside Vexa Rai broke. It wasn't a breaking of spirit. It was the breaking of a dam. The lifetime of restraint, of calculation, of playing by the rules, it all shattered. She looked at Jace's pale face. Then she looked at Kale. Her eyes ceased to be violet. They began to glow white, reflecting the fury of the core itself. She stood up. She didn't raise a weapon. She raised her hands, fingers splayed, directly interfacing with the data stream surrounding them. "You want to see a crash?" Vexa shrieked, her voice distorted by the energy she was channeling. "I will show you a crash." She didn't use a hacking tool. She used her lineage. She used the Rye family codes, combined with the stolen keys she had lifted from Kale, and she slammed them together with raw, chaotic hatred. She seized control of the room's defensive grid. "System override," Vexa commanded. "Target designation, hostile." The rivers of numbers stopped flowing. They spiked. Bolts of raw economic energy, lightning made of pure data, lashed out from the walls. They struck the Praetorian guards, not burning them, but overloading their suits' power cells. The guards convulsed as their armor locked down and shorted out, dropping them instantly. Kyle scrambled back, his personal shield flaring as a tendril of energy whipped past him. "You are insane!" Kyle screamed. "You will destroy the vault! Go!" Vexa yelled to Arya, holding her hands up as if holding back a tidal wave. "I will hold them. Go to the sphere." Arya ran. She sprinted past the fallen guards, past the screaming Kale, toward the pulsing white heart of the core. The AI voice boomed, "Air detected. Biometric scan initiated." Arya reached the center. A pedestal of light rose to meet her. It had a surface like liquid glass. "Place hands to confirm." Arya slammed her hands onto the interface. It didn't just scan her prints. Needles of light pierced her skin, drawing a drop of blood. It hurt, sharp and sudden, but she didn't flinch. Identity confirmed. Arya Solis, priming Oath Protocol. Kale pulled a disruptor pistol from his robes. He aimed at Arya's back. "I will end you." Jace, still on the ground, managed to lift his stun baton. His vision was graying out, but he saw the threat. He fired. The shot went wide, but it clipped the bridge near Kale's feet, shattering the hard light surface. Kyle stumbled, his shot firing harmlessly into the ceiling. Arya didn't look back. She took a breath. She thought of her father. She thought of the kids eating lizard skewers in the market. She thought of Vexa screaming in rage and Jace bleeding on the floor. She spoke. "I, Arya Solis, heir to the Orion Fund, hereby rewrite the terms of existence." Her voice was amplified, carried by the station's transmitters to every screen, every comms unit, every ship in the galaxy. 1. Immediate and unconditional erasure of all predatory debts held by Class C worlds. You cannot own people anymore. The sphere pulsed violently. The light turned from white to gold. 2. Absolute transparency. Every transaction, every bribe, every secret account linked to this fund is now public record. No more shadows. 3. Structural cap on institutional power. The fund is no longer a weapon, it is a shield. Control is transferred to a rotating council of citizens, drawn by lottery from the affected worlds. Kale screamed as his datapad began to smoke. "Stop. You are ruining everything." Arya raised her voice for the final command. 4. The Rye dynasty and the Stability Council are stripped of all executive privilege. The money belongs to the people. She slammed her fist onto the pedestal. "Execute!" The core exploded, not with fire but with light. A shockwave of rewritten code blasted outward. It passed through the walls, through the station, through the vacuum of space. It hit the banking mainframes and rewrote them at the quantum level. Kale's authority didn't just fade, it evaporated. On his wrist, his clearance level dropped to 0. His accounts, hidden in complex shells, were suddenly laid bare on the public net. Across the galaxy, billions of screens lit up with the truth. They saw the bribes. They saw the murder orders. They saw the theft. Kale's allies on the bridge of the fleet saw their own names appear in the damning ledger. "He is a liability," the Admiral said, watching the data scroll. Cut his link, target his ship. Inside the core, the shockwave destabilized the hard light bridge. Gravity flipped. Jace slid toward the edge of the abyss. Jace! Vexa lunged. She caught his wrist just as he went over. She dug her heels into the dissolving light, her muscles screaming. Jace dangled over an infinite drop of swirling numbers. "Let me go," Jace wheezed. "Save yourself." "Shut up." Vexa gritted her teeth, tears streaming down her face. "I promised you boring. You do not get to die before we get boring." Arya rushed over, grabbing Vexa's waist, adding her weight to the pull. Together, they heaved. They dragged Jace back onto the solidifying platform. They collapsed in a heap, gasping, trembling. The light in the room shifted. The violent storm calmed. The angry red numbers turned to a steady, peaceful blue. The AI voice spoke, calm and final. Reforms implemented. Successor structures anchored. Heir's oath logged. Kale was on his knees. He looked at his hands. He looked at the room. He was alive, but he was finished. He was destitute. He looked at the trio. Hate twisted his face into a mask of madness. He reached for his fallen pistol. "If I cannot have it," he hissed, "no one can." He raised the gun, aiming at Vexa. Arya stepped in front of her. She didn't flinch. She just looked at him with pity. A security drone, hovering silently above, scanned the weapon. It cross-referenced the new legal directives Arya had just written. Threat detected to galactic stability. Target, Kale. The drone fired. A single blue bolt struck Kale in the chest. He fell backward, his eyes wide with shock, and tumbled off the edge of the bridge, falling silently into the river of numbers he had tried to control. He was gone. Silence descended on the room. Arya looked at the drone. "Did I do that?" she asked. "The law did that," Vexa said, pulling Jace into a sitting position. "You just wrote the law," Jace groaned, clutching his chest. His armor had taken the brunt of the plasma, but his ribs were definitely broken. "Did we win?" Jace asked, wincing. Arya looked around the calming core. She looked at Vexa, who was holding Jace like he was the most precious thing in the universe. "Yeah," Arya said, smiling through her tears. "I think we just broke the bank." The signal traveled faster than light, riding the subspace quantum entanglements of the banking network. It did not move like a ship or a message. It moved like a revelation. On the dusty, sulfur-choked mining world of Othris IV, a foreman in a rusted exosuit was preparing to whip an indentured worker for failing to meet the daily quota of refined ore. The worker, a young reptilian male with scales dulled by malnutrition, cowered in the dirt, waiting for the blow. It never came. The foreman's wrist comp chimed, then it chimed again. Then it began to scream with alerts. He froze, the whip dangling from his mechanical claw. He stared at the screen. The debt ledger, the digital chain that had bound the worker's family to the mine for 3 generations, flashed red, then dissolved into static. Account liquidated. The screen read, "Balance 0. Freedom clause activated." The foreman looked up, confusion warring with fear on his sweat-streaked face. The worker looked up too. Around them, hundreds of wrist comps were chiming. The sound grew from a sporadic beeping into a digital symphony. The worker stood up. He looked at his hands, then at the foreman. He did not attack. He simply dropped his shovel. It hit the ground with a clang that echoed across the quarry. Then, he began to dance. It was a clumsy, shuffling dance, kicking up clouds of sulfur dust under the alien sun. But within moments, 1,000 others joined him. On the glitter world of Canto Bight, a planetary governor was enjoying a banquet of endangered species when the walls of his dining hall, which were actually massive screens displaying his portfolio, turned the color of blood. Hidden accounts, offshore shell companies, and laundered bribes from the weapon guilds suddenly appeared in high-definition text, scrolling for all his guests to see. The governor choked on his wine. He tapped frantically at the table interface, trying to delete the data. Access denied. The system replied calmly. Transparency protocol in effect. Public record updated. Outside his palace, the sound of a distant roar began to build. It was not the wind. It was the sound of 1,000,000 people realizing they had been robbed, and that they finally had the receipts to prove it. The galaxy did not collapse. It wobbled. It held its breath. The stock markets of the core dipped violently, sensing the end of the old predatory order. Panic selling began in the high-yield bond sector, but before the crash could turn into a depression, the archive AI, guided by the new parameters Arya had burned into the core, stepped in. It flooded the market with stabilization liquidity. It bought bad debts and forgave them. It reallocated capital from hoarding accounts to infrastructure projects. It managed the transition with the cold, precise compassion of a machine that had been given a soul. The worst shocks were absorbed, the chaos was controlled, and for the first time in 10,000 years, the flow of money reversed direction. It flowed down, like rain, onto the parched soil of the frontier. On the archive moon, the silence was heavy and medicinal. The medical bay was a sterile white room, smelling of antiseptic and ozone. Jace Coven lay in a bio-bed, his chest wrapped in regenerative bandages, a web of sensors monitoring his heartbeat. Vexa Rai sat in a chair beside him. She looked nothing like the polished executive who had glided through the bank lobby a week ago. Her silk suit was ruined, stained with smoke and dried blood. Her hair was a tangled mess. She had dark circles under her violet eyes that spoke of absolute exhaustion. But she was fiercely, terrifyingly present. She held Jace's hand as if it were an anchor keeping her from drifting off the surface of the moon. Her thumb traced the rough skin of his knuckles, over and over, a repetitive motion of comfort. Arya sat on the other side of the bed, curled up with her knees to her chest. She had washed her face, but she still wore her oversized jacket. She looked small in the chair, but her eyes were clear. "Vexa," Arya whispered. "You should sleep. The med droid said his vitals are stable." "I will sleep when he wakes up," Vexa said. Her voice was brittle, like thin glass. Arya didn't argue. She knew that look. An hour later, Jace's heart monitor beeped a faster rhythm. His eyelids fluttered. He groaned, a low, raspy sound that was the most beautiful music Vexa had ever heard. "Jace?" Vexa leaned forward, gripping his hand tighter. Jace blinked. His gray eyes were unfocused at first, swimming in a haze of painkillers. Then they found Vexa's face. "Hey," he croaked. His voice sounded like gravel grinding together. "Hey yourself," Vexa whispered. Tears spilled over her lashes, tracking through the soot on her cheeks. Jace tried to sit up and immediately winced, falling back against the pillows. Did we do it?" he asked. "We did it," Vexa said, a sob catching in her throat. "The fund is rewritten. Kale is gone. You are alive." Jace let out a long, shaky breath. He looked at Vexa, really seeing her. He saw the mess she was in, the raw, unfiltered emotion on her face. "You are crying," Jace observed weakly. "I thought bankers did not cry. It rusts the microchips." Vexa laughed, a wet, choked sound. She leaned down, resting her forehead against his arm. "I hate you," she whispered. "You stupid, noble idiot. You jumped in front of a plasma bolt." "It seemed like a good idea at the time," Jace murmured. "I refuse," Vexa said, lifting her head to look him in the eye. Her voice broke, shattering into honesty. "I refuse to live in a world where I have won everything but lost you. Do you understand me, Jace Coven? I will not do it." I will burn the money. I will crash the moon. I will not be in this universe without you. Jace looked at her. He saw the fierce, possessive love in her eyes, a love that had survived betrayal, torture, and war. He reached up, his hand shaking, and brushed a tear from her cheek. "Well," Jace whispered, a small, crooked smile touching his lips. "Then I guess I will have to hang around, if only to keep you from reorganizing the galaxy again out of boredom." Vexa let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. She leaned down and kissed him when it was soft. It was careful. It tasted of salt and relief. It was not the desperate, hungry kiss of the core, where death was seconds away. This was a kiss of promises. It was a kiss that said, "We have time." They pulled back, lingering close. Arya watched them from her chair. A warm, glowing feeling expanded in her chest, pushing out the cold memories of the maintenance tunnels. She felt a little awkward, a little like an intruder, but mostly she felt profound gratitude. She had money now, more money than she could ever count. But looking at Vexa and Jace, she knew that wasn't the wealth that mattered. "This is gross," Arya said, her voice thick with emotion, "but the good kind of gross." Vexa turned, smiling through her tears. She reached out her other hand. "Come here," Vexa said. Arya hesitated, then stood up and moved to the bed. Vexa pulled her in. Jace groaned but wrapped his good arm around her. They huddled together, the heiress, the banker, and the soldier. A three-way embrace of people who had been broken in different ways and had used the pieces to build something stronger. "You are not alone anymore." "Arya," Vexa whispered into the girl's hair. "Neither am I." The weeks that followed were a blur of bureaucracy, medical treatments, and seismic political shifts. Vexa Rai returned to the central station, but not to her corner office. She walked into the boardroom of House Rai not as a daughter, but as a prosecutor. Her testimony was devastating. She laid out the files, the recordings, and the secret memos. She stripped the veneer of respectability from her family name, the old elite, the dinner party crowd, the yacht owners, the ones who had sneered at her in the corridors, shunned her. They called her a traitor to her class. They whispered that she was mentally unstable, seduced by a radical. But the ordinary citizens, the tellers, the cleaners, the small business owners on the lower decks, they looked at her with awe. When she walked through the station concourse, people didn't bow out of fear. They nodded out of respect. Her family offered her a deal. If she recanted, if she claimed the testimony was coerced, they would reinstate her. They would give her the chairmanship. Vexa laughed in their faces. She resigned her commission and walked out of Rye Tower for the last time, leaving her inheritance on the table. She helped build the new Oversight Council, the body Arya had mandated to manage the fund. She worked 18-hour days, using her intimate knowledge of the old corrupt systems to build new ones that were leak-proof. Arya, meanwhile, was fighting a different kind of battle. The media descended on her like a swarm of locusts. They called her the Empress of Equity. They called her the Sovereign of the Fund. They printed hollows of her face on commemorative plates. She hated it. She refused the titles. She refused the palace the Senate tried to gift her. She refused the security detail of gold-plated droids. "I am just a trustee," Arya told the press, standing on a crate so she could reach the microphones. "I am just the person holding the wallet." She spent her days traveling. She took a nondescript shuttle to the worlds that had suffered the most under the old debts. She sat in community centers, in dusty town squares, and on the edges of terraforming pits. She listened. She didn't give speeches. She asked questions, and what do you need? Water filtration, schools, a new spaceport, and then she signed the authorization. But old habits died hard. One afternoon, on the station, Arya and Vexa were walking through the newly renovated Sector 4 market. Arya stopped at a street food cart. It smelled of spiced meat and roasted tubers, the smell of comfort. "I am starving," Arya said. "My treat." She ordered 3 skewers and tapped her new, unlimited bio-linked payment chip on the vendor's scanner. The scanner beeped, then it buzzed, then it smoked. "Error," the mechanical voice droned. "Transaction amount too small for account magnitude. Mathematical overflow." The vendor, a 4-eyed insectoid, stared at the machine, then at Arya. "Lady," the vendor said, "your balance has too many zeros. My machine thinks you are trying to buy the concept of food, not a skewer." Arya's face turned bright red. I just want lunch," she stammered. Vexa burst out laughing. She laughed until she had to lean on Arya's shoulder for support. "It is not funny," Arya groaned. "I own the economy and I cannot buy a snack." Vexa wiped her eyes, reaching into her pocket. She pulled out a battered physical credit chip. "Here," Vexa said, paying the vendor. "I set up a separate account for you this morning. A normal one, with a monthly allowance of 2,000 credits. "An allowance?" Arya exclaimed, taking the skewer. "I am 22. You are fiscally an infant," Vexa teased, taking a bite of her own food. "And you need to learn to budget." They didn't just rebuild the economy. They rebuilt the home they never had. Using a fraction of the discretionary fund, they bought a massive warehouse section on the station's lower levels, the same levels where the drones used to chase Arya. They gutted it. They installed skylights that piped in real sunlight from the upper collectors. They built dormitories with soft beds, private showers, and warm lighting. They built a kitchen that served free, hot meals 24 hours a day. It was called the Solace Center. It was a place where nobody had to sleep in a maintenance tunnel. It was a place where you could get a suit of clothes, a medical scan, and a job placement without judgment. Jace Coven stood by the entrance, watching the evening intake. He was the head of security, but he didn't wear a uniform. He wore jeans and a simple jacket. The scar on his neck from the plasma burn was visible. A jagged line of pink skin, but he moved with an easy strength. Vexa walked up beside him. She was holding a data pad, reviewing the intake numbers. "Full capacity again," Vexa said softly. "We might need to open another wing on level 6. Jace looked at her. She was wearing simple trousers and a blouse, her hair tied back. She looked more beautiful to him now than she ever had in her diamonds. "We can handle it," Jace said. He reached out and placed his hand on the small of her back. It was a casual, intimate gesture, the kind that spoke of established comfort. Vexa leaned into his touch, her shoulder brushing his arm. They stood there for a moment, watching a family of refugees being checked in by a smiling volunteer. "Are you happy?" Jace asked quietly. Vexa looked at the scene. She looked at the lack of fear in the people's eyes. "I am tired," she admitted, "but I sleep at night. That is new." Jace smiled and kissed her temple. It was a stolen moment in a busy corridor, unnoticed by anyone else. They were partners in work, partners in love, navigating the messy reality of building a life together. Arya walked by, carrying a stack of blankets. She paused, seeing them. She saw the way Jace looked at Vexa, like she was the only star in the sky. She saw the way Vexa relaxed into him, her guard completely down. Arya smiled. She touched her own cheek, where a faint, thin scar from the tunnel days still ran along her jawline. The med droids had offered to remove it. They said they could graft new skin, make her flawless. Arya had refused. Why keep it? The droid had asked. It is damaged tissue. It is a map, Arya had replied. I need to remember where I came from. If I forget, I become them. She adjusted her grip on the blankets and kept walking. She had work to do. The galaxy was vast and corruption was a hydra. For every head they cut off, 2 more tried to grow. New power players emerged. Corporate raiders trying to find loopholes in Arya's reforms. Politicians trying to leverage the new voting blocks. There were assassination threats. There were attempted hacks. But they were ready. Arya had the legal hammer. Vexa had the insider knowledge of where the bodies were buried. And Jace had the tactical mind to see the threats before they arrived. They functioned as a triad. They argued over dinner about policy. They debriefed in the living room of the small apartment they shared attached to the center. They fought back to back, legally and sometimes physically, against anyone who tried to turn the clock back. 6 months later, the central branch of the Interstellar Reserve Bank had changed. The towering energy doors were gone, replaced by open archways. The armed guards in gold armor were gone, replaced by community guides in blue vests. The grand lobby, once a cathedral of silence and exclusion, was now a roar of noise. It had been repurposed as the Galactic Civic Hall. There were kiosks for small business grants. There were dispute resolution circles. There were holographic displays showing the real-time flow of the reparations fund. Every credit tracked, every project visible. Arya Solis stood at the entrance. She wore clean clothes, dark trousers, a sturdy jacket, and boots that actually fit. She looked healthy. Her hair was trimmed, but she didn't look like royalty, and she looked like a citizen. People walked past her. Some recognized her and nodded or waved. Some stopped to say thank you. But there was no hysteria. She had succeeded in becoming human-sized again. She saw a movement near the decorative pillar where she had once hidden. A child. He was maybe 10 years old. Human, with dirt smudged on his nose and clothes that were 3 sizes too big. He was clutching a small, broken toy robot. He was looking at the marble floor, then at the people, terrified to step across the threshold. He looked exactly like she had. Arya felt a lump in her throat. She walked over, kneeling down so she was at eye level with him. The boy flinched, clutching his robot tighter. "Hey," Arya said softly. "Cool robot." The boy looked at her suspiciously. "It is broken," he whispered. "We can fix it," Arya said. "There is a workshop inside, and they have hot soup." The boy looked at the open doors. "I cannot go in there," he said. "They will chase me away." Arya smiled. It was a sad smile, but full of light. "No, they won't. I promise." She held out her hand. "Come in," she said. "They laughed at me once too. Turns out, they had no idea what I was worth." The boy hesitated. Then slowly, he reached out and took her hand. Arya stood up, leading him into the light and noise of the hall. Up on the mezzanine balcony, leaning against the railing where Vexa had once looked down in disdain, 2 figures watched. Vexa Rai and Jace Coven stood side by side. Vexa's arm was linked through Jace's. He was whispering something in her ear that made her smile. A true, unguarded smile that crinkled the corners of her violet eyes. They watched Arya lead the child to a help desk. They watched the staff greet him with kindness. They watched the system work not for the few, but for the one. Vexa leaned her head on Jace's shoulder. He kissed the top of her head, his arm tightening around her waist. They fit together perfectly, 2 healed halves of a whole, standing watch over the world they had helped build. The camera pulled back, widening the shot. It showed the bustling hall, filled with Antari, humans, Viridians, and species from the furthest reaches of the frontier. It showed robes and rags mixing freely. It showed the holographic screens displaying not profit margins but literacy rates, water purity levels, and housing statistics. Over the scene, Arya's voice, internal, calm, and wise beyond her years, echoed one last time. My father told me that money was a language. For a long time, I thought it was a language of threats, of barriers, of silence. I was wrong. It is just energy. It is just a tool. It has no morality of its own. It is the hand that holds it that decides if it is a weapon or a brick. I was a homeless human girl who walked into a galactic bank, and they laughed at me, Arya thought, smiling softly as the boy took his first sip of soup. Now, when they look at me, I hope they see not my balance but the lives it changed.